join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Just a reminder, make sure your microphones are on and you speak into them so those at home can hear. And if you are speaking from the audience, if you would please go to the podium and state who you are and where you're from, that would be appreciated. Our first item on the agenda tonight is a joint meeting with the Finance Committee for line item transfers in the end of fiscal year 15. Vicky's on vacation this week, and she had previously submitted these transfers for the board's review and proposal. The Finance Committee met last night to approve them, but I don't think that they were approved yet, right? Pending discussion. So in your packets, on page, I don't have a page number, but page 4, you have the transfers. Does the Finance Committee want to walk through them line by line, or would you like me to do that? Okay, so will you stop me when we have discussion? Okay. So I'm just going to read right from page 4. The first is a $600 deficit in the assistant assessor wages. This is for the payroll for the remaining 2 days of the fiscal year. There's a $1,000 deficit in the treasurer collector wages, which is a shortage in payroll from a prior paycheck plus the last 2 days in June. There's a $19,000 deficit in the communication wages, which is payroll for the past 2 paychecks and last 2 days of June, plus the estimated CBA payment of vacation time, et cetera, for the police and dispatch. I think
Did you want us to stop on certain lines?
whenever you want to talk about it. So I would note that I think the communication wages, we probably knew when we did the budget last year that we didn't budget enough in that line item. Next, we have a $2,000 deficit in the general highway.
I'm sorry. Yeah, because it's not the deficit that we're concerned about, it's where the money, I think, is being
Taken from. Okay, are we on the communication wages?
Correct. So
Okay.
With that one, and the first question actually reflects on a couple others in there as well. It's kind of the 11th hour, and we're just finding out, hey, we're $19,000 over on this item, we're $15,000 over on this. I've been to previous select board meetings where there's been it's a sort of a report out, how are we doing budget-wise? Have you known about these issues in the past few meetings, the past month or so, that we would have $90,000 worth of transfers to do?
Probably we knew about the communication wages that we would be short because we did, when we budgeted last year, we didn't budget enough, which is something that we fixed in the budget for next year. We knew about winter roads, obviously.
Like I said, we get monthly revenue and expense reports too. So we look at, I look at those. So yes.
But I think to Mike's point, I don't think that we actually sat down and said, okay, I think we're going to be $90,000 in the hole at the end of this. I think we probably knew there's this line item and this line item, but I don't think it was a conversation that we have had. We just knew there would be some.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to your point, there's maybe a lack of due diligence in the oversight of that part of it.
Okay. In our next question in relation to the communication wages, and I know Charlie has done some research on this, utilization of the E911 grant to pay for some of those wage overruns. Is there anything you can share with us on that?
I did some checking with the state. That was a grant of 2012. There hasn't been any other grants that have been established. And it's my understanding through the police chief that you can transfer money out of that to do those wage communication issues.
You can?
You can.
So then how do we know how much money is available to transfer?
That would be something your accountant would have to be able to tell you as to what's left over in there.
I think our concern is that 19,000, 10,000 came from police budget, 9,000 came from everywhere, no other departments.
Right.
We didn't understand, right?
Yeah, yes. And the other thing too, and I'm going to I guess, go out on a limb here, you need to provide specific direction to your accountant how you would like her to handle transferring of funds, because we did meet with her at our last meeting, and she was not comfortable. She was not going to take it upon herself to put forth that transfer without proper documentation in front of her, which makes sense because she had a copy from 2012, and to her, it didn't make sense that it was, why do I have a 2012 grant if we get this every year? Turns out it was 3 years old, so.
Yeah, I contacted the state directly, and they told me that was the last grant that Southampton received,
Okay.
was the 2012.
I mean, we would encourage the use of the money in the departments to pay for the shortfalls, especially if this money has been here since 2012 and has not been utilized.
So we need to figure out how much money is in there
Correct.
at
And
the 13th hour.
Mike, do you have that expense report that I gave you? If you hand it to Donna, she might be able to find it real quick for you.
Do you want me to keep going while you look? There's $20,000 in there that if we don't use it now is just going to roll over until the next year and sit there? That's what happens with it. So unless we said specifically to Vicky, move this money, it wouldn't get moved. But there's no reason we couldn't move that money. Right? True?
I don't know what the restrictions on the grant are, but the implication I got out of the police chief was that he could utilize it for wages.
I think that Vicki had talked before about when it was put through on payroll and charged to that. I don't know if she can just.
Transfer the money.
I don't know if she can transfer it into, say, the wage line as a transfer if it wasn't originally charged.
So if someone were, if he submitted his payroll for, a week and said that this payroll needs to come out of this line item, at that point, she could do it.
Right, but don't quote me on that, because I'm not sure, but I know we had that conversation, so I don't know if she can come back now and transfer money to be effective for June 30th to cover some of the fiscal 15 shortfall.
No, but is it possible that in fiscal 16, they could start doing that, and then when that line item is over, it would just fall back in, into either the police or into the general fund, since it's budgeted correctly for this year?
Right.
Okay. Let's have Heather find out those answers. Does that make more sense?
it does, I mean,
No.
to be honest, it's rather discouraging to our group, since we have brought this discussion
Up
up
more
for the
than
last
once.
3 months.
Mhm.
We have not gotten an answer. We've requested copies of all grants. We've received, I think, 1 page of this grant. And I don't know of other grants we've received as a group. We've specifically requested it in a communication to the select board, which is another topic.
That did go out
which
to
will-
all departments.
Correct. So it's just, we're at this point now where you need to fill a void where if we did what we were talking about doing 2 months ago, we wouldn't be at this. There would be $19,000 less on that to worry about. So you'd be at 70 as opposed to 90 for the last transfer, so.
Right.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah, Francine Tish, my understanding, and I'm speaking what I understood Vicki explained to me, is that this is an annual grant. This is not just what we got in 2012. That's how we went. We get approximately, according to her, $7,000 or $8,000 a year. That was her explanation to me, because originally I thought we had $7,000 or $8,000, now we have $20,000. I think there was additional revenue that came in. I'm sorry she's not here, but that was the explanation she gave me. So we should plan, if it is money that comes in annually, we should plan as part of the budget planning process to utilize those funds and apply them, because now we're $19,000 that we could have, that would probably materialize as,
It was 14.
it was 14.
8,300 was added.
Right, so now we're at 22, well, after some expenses, we're at 20,376. So What I'm saying is that $19,000 would then be available, rolled into free cash that we're going to, obviously count on next year, which is an unfortunate situation for us to be in, but it would be available to us. And I guess that's just the question that we have. Planning the sources of the revenue and how we're going to apply them. That should be part of the plan. If we lump everything together as wages, and then you have this huge category called expenses without a lot of detail. And I think the more detail we get and a better understanding we have, I think we'll do a better job, and we may not be ending up at the end of the year having to transfer funds, as often. This is the third time we're doing it in the last month or 6 weeks, something like that. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
So Heather, you were out of the room, but the Finance Committee is right. They've been asking for this information on the 911 grant for months now. It was part of the budget conversation. And so now we're hearing there's $20,000 available, how we could possibly use that in fiscal 16. But could you just find out, please, how this grant works? Where does the money come from? When does the money come in? If we're not getting it from wherever we're asking for, could you find out?
I think Charlie's raising his
Oh,
hand.
sorry. There seems to be two trains of thought here. Either it was in 2012 or it comes in annually, and I would like to know what's actually
The
happening.
conversation I had with the state was that was one grant, 2012. What I'm hearing is two trains of thought.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'll go back to the state and try to get this nailed down directly. I've asked the police chief for some number crunching also, but that hasn't been forthcoming at this point.
Right, that would be helpful if you could do
It could
that.
have been one grant over 3 years,
Well, the way they said it to me was there was one grant in 2012. Southampton has not received any more grant money since then.
No, I don't think that's true, because it shows an income in of 8,000 for fiscal 15.
Which means I have to go back to them and say, why are you sending us money if we didn't get a grant?
That's why we don't know whether the grant page that was provided is applicable
Right.
for this year or.
So can you come back to us with that information at our next meeting?
No?
Oh, because you won't be here.
Could you get the information to one of us before your next meeting?
I will attempt to.
Thank you. Should I keep going now? Okay. So we have general highway wages, a deficit of $2,000. That's for the payroll for the remaining 2 days of the fiscal year. The gas and electric at the Larrabee Building is a deficit of $1,442.89. Hold on, I'm just trying to keep the line items here. We have a town hall building expense deficit of $32.50, which is the quarterly water bill. Fire department expenses. This is the year-end fuel and electric bills. Oops. Year-end fuel and electric bills and the Fire Chief Association dues. There is the EMT license and certification deficit of $29.22. The ambulance expense deficit of $5,175.11, which is the repairs of radios, new masks for employees, which were waited to purchase, needed to determine how to proceed with the new monitor for the ambulance. Yes? Want me to keep going or no? There's building expense deficit of $693.20, which is for building code books and travel for meetings. Board of Health expenses of $48.58, which was for the renewal of a soil license and miscellaneous mile reimbursement. The road machinery maintenance of $500, which is for fuel billing in June. Winter roads and winter roads wages and expenses, which we knew were coming. Water expenses, which is a deficit of $17,859.01, which is for water bills, electric for the year end, and services from 15, or services from, right. Medicare, a deficit of $3,000, which is the town's portion of Medicare, and the park commission wages of $650, which were wages charged to the park for mowing. Are there any questions going forward about this stuff? John?
Go ahead.
Yep, please do.
Janet and I represented the Finance Committee in a meeting with the audit firm for going back to the fiscal year 14. But one of the comments that they made was a continuing problem, was something to do with the software that the Water Department or the Water Commission uses to do billing. And every year we find ourselves in this situation of having to reconcile. And they made a recommendation, I think in last year's audit report, and repeated it again this year, that we should be using different software so that we don't find ourselves in this situation every year. So you might want to
Check into that.
check into that.
What is the name of that new different software?
So right now, what's happening is they're using QuickBooks. Donna could speak more to this if I can't answer the question. But right now, they're using QuickBooks, and QuickBooks has many problems, including the fact they can't charge interest, they have trouble with abating things later on, et cetera, et cetera. We have looked, or Donna has looked at different softwares, including one that's compatible with the taxes already, which is Point. She sat down with Jim from Point with the water commissioners and has reviewed this. At their last meeting, they had a couple reservations for various things, including on what the look of the bill is when it's produced out, and also
The look of it?
the look of the bill when it's produced out, as well as some concerns over transitioning to the new system. So they're meeting again, I believe, on Thursday. Donna will be there, hopefully with a new format of the bill, and also hopefully be able to answer any other reservations. I have spoken with water commissioners and also the water superintendent, and I have reviewed the concept of, doesn't really matter what they switch to, but it's got to be something other than QuickBooks, and it would be preferable if we moved further faster or made a decision so that we didn't keep putting ourselves in the same situation with the audit year after year.
What's the cost associated with switching to a new system?
Well, it would come out of the Water Enterprise Fund, so it wouldn't trigger the general fund, but one of the benefits of switching to, for, say, Point is we would be able to bundle and upgrade onto the tax software itself at a lower cost. And we budgeted for that this year.
So what is the cost of the software?
Right.
It's around $8,000 for the water software, I think. And then annually, there's this, annual support fee. But, the cost analysis that was done to switch to this, from what they're paying right now, they're gonna save, even in the first year, they're gonna save $7,000 to $8,000. And then after that, it's gonna be over 10, over what we're paying the vendor now to do.
So
what
why
he does.
in the world would there be reservations? If you're gonna recoup the cost in the first year, why are you worried about the visual look of it?
Right, because
Well, I was wondering if there was-
the same software, they're concerned that it's gonna look too much like the real estate bill, because it's on the same, same formatted.
You put a flyer in the first bill.
Are there any other concerns other than the look of it and the transition?
Well, for one thing, as was
Can you-
discussed at the water.
Can you go to the
Can you go to the
podium?
podium? You look beautiful today.
I just came in to get a note signed, but anyway. What was the question again?
Are
Sorry.
there any other concerns other than the look of it and the transition that?
Oh, the transition. Well, I know that there's Point gave the water commissioners a list of some of the other towns that already use the software, and Hadley, I believe it is, uses the same gun software with Point, so it would be exactly mirror image of what is currently being done. So this isn't his first rodeo. He's done this before. He's done conversions before. He's looked at the data that we have and how he can map that data into his software and doesn't anticipate a problem. We talked about making a decision. The timing of it has to be such that the bills went out in June. They're due in the next week or 10 days. Now is the time to switch, because the next reading is going to happen like the first full week or so of September. if we did it now, it would give time to work out any bugs, to do a trial reading, to upload that information, to make sure everything's working fine, without trying to crunch it into a 2-week time period. Another reason to do it now is that to track it by fiscal year, the September reading will be the first fiscal year reading, and if we wait and do it after that, then we're not going to have this, it's not going to have a full fiscal year. It's, you know, we're going to be trying to load information. It's not going to be a complete fiscal year when we start.
When does
So-
the Water Commission meet again to talk about this?
Thursday night at 6:30.
Where do they meet?
At the, yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
Yes. We're back to that.
So don't wear white. It's kind of dirty in there.
You gonna go?
I don't know if I'll be able to go. We have basketball camp, but
I've got something at 6:30, I might be able to push to 6, it's just a quick thing, but, so if you can't go,
okay.
text me. So that's all that's holding it up? Is these few minor?
That was what was explained to me. I mean, you know, right now the water bills have a little water symbol on them, like water, like a wave. And these, you know, if we upgrade, if we upgrade to, Point has this tax link, which is an upgrade to what we have now, so that you can create PDF forms and stuff, which is something that I can't do with the current software. So Jim did not know that we had budgeted for that, so I informed him last week that, you know, should the commissioners go to this point, I have money in my budget to upgrade to the tax link. That gives him a little more flexibility, because then he could create the water bills in a PDF, which allows him more flexibility in altering the bill or the look of the bill. So he was working on that. He's supposed to send me something to show the commissioners prior to the meeting.
I for one don't care how pretty the bill is, as long as I know what it is, my $42, I pay it. And if we're
And
spending.
it has to have like the last reading usage, and then a year ago for the same period usage, which they explained to Jim, and he said he didn't have a problem, like that would not be difficult to put that on there, like that wasn't an
Just
issue.
historic information, that seems pretty basic to a program.
Right.
I mean, if you want, I'd like to make a motion that we support getting this done as soon as possible, and we relay that to the Water Commission.
I think I want to hear from the Water Commission before I say that. I mean, I trust your information.
Well, you can
Like that?
still go, but with our support that, you know,
Moving forward is a positive thing.
My concern is that only 2 of the 3 commissioners were there at the last meeting, and I didn't know if that was part of the reason that they didn't make a decision. However, I think that 3rd member, I was told, is not going to make it because he's away to this meeting also. So,
Okay.
but we've been talking about this for months. I mean, we've been in discussions.
And how many years in a row has it come up with the audit? Is this the
Like
second?
5.
Oh, more than 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
this is low-hanging fruit. It's
Okay.
just-
So you have a motion on the floor. Do you want me to take Mrs. Walunas before we take a
Well, you
second?
guys see if you got a second or not.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there other discussion? Mrs. Walunas.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway, speaking on the behalf of Water Commission. This item is on their agenda for Thursday. They know about it. Issues of not converting over to the software was because of older generation not wanting to go to new. So they know about it. There's a new person in there now, and
They're moving that way?
yes.
Okay.
Old
So
not-
it is on their
Agenda.
agenda.
You say old not wanting, because we don't want to change because we've been doing this for so long type of?
That kind of business.
Can't teach an old dog new tricks.
There's no place
Okay.
for that, though, yeah.
Okay. So go ahead. There's a motion and a second to show the Board of Selectmen's support in moving forward with this new system to the Water Commissioners. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've gone through all of the deficits. The money will now come from, ready? Vicki does this so much more eloquently than I do, but,
We're going to read all these?
well, that's what Vicki does.
I don't know that we want to read them.
Does anybody have any concerns over where the money's coming from? Are, Okay.
I would read them, though, because people at home don't have a copy of this in front of them, so they're going to say where you're taking the money from.
Okay.
So I'll do it as quickly as I can. The assessor expenses, $600, treasurer expenses, $1,000, police maintenance equipment, $1,300, communication expenses, $800, police education incentive, $392.14, police expenses, $8,000, general highway expenses, $2,000, building inspector salary, $6,316, building inspector clerical wages, $2,885.06, EMT wages, $5,493.11, ambulance billing, $29.22, fire department wages, $3,873, telephone, $975.82, Larrabee building expenses, $500, Board of Health clerical, $48.58, general highway expenses, $34,935.57, water capital expenses, $15,000, water wages, $2,859.01, workers' comp, $622.35, group health retiree, $2,377.65, veterans benefits, $450, and park commission expenses, $200. So the amount being transferred to cover the overdrawn accounts is $90,657.51. My question is, why is there so much money left in the general highway expenses? Could you? Yeah.
Amanda Kemp. Actually, Randy and I had that conversation. He was told by Vicky that he was going to have to figure out how to cover winter roads with the wage, like expenses and wages, and so he did not spend out of the general highway expenses to be able to cover that. So there were things he didn't do so that he could cover that out of his budget.
And is that generally how it works? Like, don't we get to deficit spend? So why?
You do, but it still has to come from somewhere.
Somewhere. Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, I guess comments and concerns to what we're looking at here and what the Finance Committee said. Before I go on there, is there any reason we can't have a PowerPoint on this stuff so that we can see it and you can turn a camera on it and the people at home will see it?
It's certainly something we can work on.
We can do it. I wouldn't say PowerPoint, because that's going to be another 6 hours of my day, so if the board wishes
I
me
didn't
to
want to say
spend the time.
overhead and make me feel old, that's
So,
all.
what we could probably do, John, is what I was thinking a little bit earlier, is plug in the laptop
Yep.
and just throw up Dropbox.
Yeah. Yeah, I could actually plug in, or you could plug in right from here. Okay, so that was the easy one. We're sitting here and we've got $90,000 of deficits on one side, and we got $90,000 of extra revenue, or extra expenses. I can't really say that, but you know what I mean. Expenses less than we budgeted, which is $180,000 difference. And several people up here are going, wow, that's a lot, where'd it come from? Which tells us we're not doing our job right. In the past, we looked at the monthly revenue and expense reports that Joyce gave us. I know I look at them every month. We used to review them, so I would like to see once a month that we put it on the agenda, that we spend a half hour reviewing the revenue and expenses so that we know, so we don't have to say, why is the highway general expenses over? We should know that. We shouldn't have to ask people out there. And the other part to that is, we said we were going to have the major department heads here on a regular basis, and we very seldom see them. If we can put them on a rotating basis so we have some every month, when we review the revenue and expenses, you got the people right there. I mean, we're operating in a vacuum here, and we get surprised every time we come. And we're getting surprised because it's our fault by not being as involved as we should. So I'd like to see those two things going forward on the agenda, and we can split the major department heads. You know, bi-monthly they come here. We very seldom see certain department heads here at all. And I don't know about you, but if they're working for us, we should be seeing them in accounting for the revenue and expenses. And I think we could stop some of this, because I think we left up to $180,000 on the table that we didn't know of. And that's a lousy management of our funds, I think.
Is there a number that's left now? Like, now that we've transferred all this money and the year is over, what's left over?
There's,
It's not, I mean, Joyce is still entering another warrant for 15, so I hope that's not gonna change any of the numbers that Vicki proposed, you know, because there were more expenses that came in. And the revenues, you know, not everything has been posted and, you know, it's certainly not closed.
So it's not the final?
No.
Okay.
If you were to look at the expense reports, for instance, there are funds left over in certain accounts.
Right.
I'm assuming until those final warrants are processed, you're not.
So we don't have a general idea of where we're at yet.
No, and this isn't all of them either. This is just to make the overage. So
Liz?
I think
Yeah.
we need to be more accountable on those.
So if the board recalls, a few months ago, we had the conversation about talking back and forth about the likelihood, probability, or possibility of doing purchase orders required in June or having a halt on all spending in the month of June. I think the board may find it interesting if they were to look at the purchases that were accrued in the past 30 days. I understand what you're saying, John. I've been staying on top of the finances. I've been giving the board an update every 3 months on things. I don't think it really would have helped with predicting things. I think a lot of things have come in the last 30 days. Case in point, there was one situation where, because remember, although we required purchase orders, most people at this point were getting a purchase order after they got the invoice. So what had happened was a purchase was made in March or April. The company never invoiced us until July something. They remembered they forgot the invoice in the amount of $8,000. So things like this are problematic. We could have encumbered the money and we would have known. And I know all vendors aren't that great about it. I had a problem with the IT company. I already had a purchase order for $1,400. The price came in at $1,600, but it took me the past 2.5 weeks to actually get the invoice from them. So, you know, you have things like that. Another example, we had a problem earlier in the month where we noticed something where someone had bought a piece of office furniture for a couple $100. We had them return it, but if you notice here, the same department's on here and they're at a negative $48. Where would they have been if they had maintained their $200-300 item that they had just purchased? June 30th, I received purchase orders for items to pay for them in the amount of several $1,000s. I went to the town accountant, I said, I'm concerned. She said, there's still money in the budget. I said, I'm still concerned about purchasing this at the last second. The item, she said, let's approve it. Okay, so we approved the purchase order, the item's purchased. Next thing you know, a couple days later, you find out there were emergency purchases that were made, and now that number is negative, where it would have came in positive with actual money left in the account. I think a lot of this problem comes down to the same concern I've been expressing right along, is the ability, people get really nervous at the end of the year, they start looking at the next budget, maybe they need something, maybe they could wait off, maybe they don't. It would be interesting, I think fascinating for the board to look at what purchases have been made from June 1st to June 30th.
Do you have that list?
We can get it for you.
That would be helpful.
I think that's fine, but I don't think it takes away the fact that we need to see this on a regular, monthly basis. You bringing it to us quarterly really doesn't do much. I think we all need to look at this when Joyce sends it to us, and then we need to discuss it and talk to the folks every month and ask them questions. I mean, I think that's our job to do that. And looking at these expenses over, I don't think we've done our job here.
Are there any other concerns or questions about the transfers?
Before we do that, so, I mean, I spotted off what I'd like to see. Are we in agreement with doing that on a monthly basis?
That's
Reviewing
fine
the
with-
revenue
that's-
and expenses?
That's fine with me. Can you put?
Do you think, I'm sorry, Liz, do you think that's more of the department head's job to keep track of their expenses? Like, I review Joyce's list that comes out every time she sends it. And really, the department heads, we need to put them, you know, in charge of that, and they should be reviewing that. They should know that they can or cannot make a purchase.
100%
I just don't
agree.
want it to be put down on us at the end. They should be held
But it
accountable
is
for
put
it.
down on, that's our job. That's why we're elected,
needs
to
to
hold all of those people accountable. So
Exactly, but it needs to start with them.
But how do you hold them accountable if they're not sitting right there and you question them on it?
right,
Right now, they
But
should
right-
be accountable, but they haven't done a good job in some departments.
right. I
Some-
see, yes, they should know what money they have to spend, but it's our job to say to them, are you doing your job? That's what our job is to do.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying we definitely have to address the department heads.
Right.
But it's semantics, you know, that's part of our job is to review it with them to keep them on task. Right. So are we in agreement to also bring the department heads in, major ones, on a rotating bi-monthly basis? Because we talked about this and we said, let's do it, and kind of flopped.
I think that if you're going to do it, it needs to be a directive to Heather to just have it on the agenda once a month.
Oh,
So, a roll-
100%.
you know, we don't have to, every month, we don't need to say, did you put it on the agenda once a month? Whatever the first meeting is, or the second meeting, it's an overview, and then department heads know, okay, the first Monday of whatever month we're coming in, we're going to meet, and
So do you want to bring all the department heads every month to go over it, or?
I think if we're going to do our job effectively, that probably would be the best thing
I
to
would
do.
say, I think the major ones, you know, I don't know that we need to bring in the assessors, let's say, because they've got small budgets, but the 4 or 5 major ones, I think is important.
I think it's going to be burdensome on the departments to find representation on a monthly basis.
Oh,
I think
well.
it would make more sense to do, I understand some of these employees are salary, some of these employees unfortunately are not salary, and a lot of them are hourly. So it's just tapping, I mean, if they're here, they're not doing their job during the rest of the day or being someplace else.
But if I'm talking about the fire chief, the police chief, highway department, maybe the treasurer's office and that, we don't have any hourly people so far that I've clicked off. Correct?
You could schedule this monthly and then, you know, ask, you know, every 3 months for one of them to come in. You could do it that way.
See, I think we're just being too easy. They need to live up to their budgets, and if we find out 3 months into it, they're not doing it, we're going to have a problem here. I think we need to bring them here and keep them accountable. We've been too easy.
I thought we already did this. I thought we already.
Well, we talk about it all the
about
time,
it.
but we've never done it.
And we haven't enforced it.
Who needs to enforce it?
We need to make it a directive.
What, do we need, I know, I understand that.
Oh,
I'm saying, do we need to have Heather send him a form? Didn't we already say
we need to
that?
send an
Did that?
invitation.
She was supposed to do that.
You did. You already met with the police, fire, and highway department. We held a special meeting so the board could
talk to
check
them.
in with them about approximately, I think it was before a special town meeting, so it was in May.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to make it burdensome on the major department heads. So if we go every other month where they have to come in, there's only like 4 or 5 of them, and we look at the revenue and expense every month as a group, I think that would be fine. And if they say they can't come in, then we've got a problem, and we want to bring them in for something else. I mean, some people don't know some department heads in
They
town.
should submit it to us whether they're here or not, though.
To what?
Like in writing?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So at least we have record. So if something comes up and they can't make it, at least we have record of it. Because you know somebody's going to say something where they can't make it. I mean, at least if you have something from them submitted.
As long as it's not on a consistent basis.
So do you want to start with scheduling this once a month to talk about the report?
I'd put it in.
Just one other thing. While you're talking about the monthly review of expenses, I also think I would suggest that we also look at revenue.
Well,
on
I'm
a
saying
monthly
revenue
basis.
and expense.
Because, again, you know, I think there are some patterns that we saw this year that we didn't see last year, and we've never recovered the money. So, I mean, we need to be asking some questions and having a better understanding of what's going on and try to facilitate a fix rather than, you know, grinding away at you know, from the negative side. But there has to be some constructive discussion around some of the issues that we're having. And it does take the department heads' participation in this. This is not an outside,
Absolutely.
you know,
And
third party here. We're all in this together, so
I
would
think I
hope
have a
that we could do
brilliant
that.
idea. So if we just put,
you want to announce that?
we just want to put this on the agenda, you know, if you put this on, when does this report come out? On the last of the month, right?
She does it every 2 weeks, every
So if you put this on for a monthly review of expense and revenue report monthly, so the first meeting of the month, then once we look at that, you're going to see some outliers that you're going to want to talk to. At that point, you send an invitation to those people that say, at our next meeting, we'd like you to come in. You know, the police department may be fine 1 month and not the next month, so we don't need to see him. The fire department may be fine 1 month and not the next month. So if we talk about it at one meeting and then invite them into the next meeting, that takes everybody off the hook for every meeting, and we get the job accomplished. So
Good
could you put that on monthly now, effective in August? Expense and revenue review. Thanks.
Can I also offer that, we should probably see every department head at least every quarter?
I
because-
think we probably will if we do it like this.
Okay.
Right. So are there any other questions about the transfers?
What is the intention for the E911 grant?
I think Charlie's going to get a hold of the state and figure out what's actually happening and get that, and hopefully get that information to us before he leaves the country, and then we can send it to you. Yeah. That's the plan. So hopefully we have some information to you by our next meeting.
So as of right now, the transfers before the board are as is.
Yes.
My hope is to secure the actual grant, so we can read it and see what it actually says.
Can we table the communications wages until the next meeting then, since there's more transfers coming, until you find that out, or?
I was under the impression, I know that Donna said there's more, but at our last meeting, Vicki had said that this was the last round of transfers. So
I think there's going to be more.
I guess I don't want to table it in case it is. Right, I don't think they can, right. So I would accept a motion from the board to approve the line item transfers, the final round of line item transfers for fiscal 15.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Does the finance committee need to vote on it tonight or no?
I need to do with the exception of M and N, if we can separate it out, 'cause I don't want to ruin the grant program.
Oh,
We have a motion on the floor to vote with the exception of items mentioned. Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? Nay?
No, that's my cat.
thank you, finance committee. Oh, sorry.
Do the same thing, but you won't stand it.
All in favor? Aye.
So on the first one, Mike, just to review the vote, it was 3-1?
Yes, with one abstention.
No, that was on the first one. The second one was the one
Oh,
that
okay,
abstained. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a note to sign for $80,600 for the October 2011 storm. Donna has requested bids for bonding for the remaining $80,600 debt for the October 11 storm, and she has the paperwork. Can you give a brief explanation of what we're signing
This is,
at the podium?
we've been. So, we paid down 15,000, that's what we budgeted for fiscal 16, to pay down 15,000 of this debt. So the balance that we're borrowing is, that we're like renewing, is 80,600. Of that, about 51,000 we're hoping we're going to get back from the state. This was from the October storm, but we still haven't gotten it. It's not guaranteed that we're going to get it, so, and it was, the rate is 0.64% for 1 year through Easthampton Savings.
Donna, may I ask, which state agency is handling that money? MEMA?
I don't know. Randy knows. I don't know.
If you could find out, maybe I could talk to somebody.
I mean, it's not just us that hasn't gotten it, it's like all the towns.
I'm not interested in the other towns. I'm talking about us.
It hasn't been released, I don't think it's been approved budget, I don't know. All I know is that this has been since 2011, and I know that Randall called and talked to somebody within the last 6 months, and just
Could-
to check up on it.
Could you just get me that information? If I call and I get nowhere, no harm, no foul. But if I call and we get the money,
So I need a motion to sign the note in the amount of $80,600 for the 2011 Halloween storm debt.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion to sign the note for the debt?
well, I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of signing the note for the debt, say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Nays? Ladies, you have to vote, yes or no?
Nay.
Why wouldn't, oh,
I'd like to see what's going on with the MEMA or the FEMA.
Well, we have to.
but we have to borrow to pay for the storm. We have to borrow it no matter what, whether we're gonna get the money back or not
Okay.
from them. We have to borrow.
And what's in with the note? Can we pay it sooner than later? Is there any penalties if we get the grant and we pay it?
It's a one-year note at point, what, 6.4?
Or when you're,
We borrowed the full amount that we spent that we weren't reimbursed in order to avoid having it come off of our free cash. So that's why it was borrowed initially. And now we are budgeting to pay down $15,000 a year because that's what our budget can handle. And so we paid down the 15 and now we're borrowing it on a yearly basis because number one, if we get the money back, we can pay it off. And number two, the interest rate is much lower than saying, initially, when we borrowed the $293,000 to go out and say, I'm gonna borrow this for 10 years because the rate would have been much higher. So that's where we borrow it on an annual basis and gradually are paying it off.
Okay, well, we have,
This is a normal transaction. This is nothing, and it's atypical of the federal government and the state government to have long periods of time before reimbursement does occur.
so you need the three of us that voted yes to sign here?
$500 a year or something like that?
All three of us.
I have a red pen. That's not going to look good. I don't know.
Thank you.
You wanna hold that one? I guess.
The next item on the agenda is a request from the Girl Scouts for a food drive at the town hall. Janine had initially spoken with Heather and asked that this be placed on the Board of Selectmen agenda. We've received a written request from a junior Girl Scout Troop 11062 to allow a food collection bins at the town hall to further their Bronze Award project. Heather, do you have the letter so I could read it?
yes, ma'am. Shannon, can you pass it down?
From two of my favorite future sixth graders. It's dated June 9th, 2015. It says, "Dear Board of Selectmen, our names are Alyssa Tobias and Emma Archambault. We are Southampton Junior Girl Scouts in Troop 11062. We're working together to earn our Bronze Award. This is a take-action project for our community that we feel is needed and sustainable. So we are writing to ask you to consider giving us permission to put up a food donation box in the town hall. The food collected will be brought to the Southampton Community Cupboard. The cupboard has been open to families in need since 2010. The project is important since the cupboard runs on donations only. The cupboard is nonprofit and the box will be checked weekly. We hope you will approve this idea. It would really help the cupboard and the people in our community. Please contact our troop leader with your decision so we continue our work on this project. Sincerely, Alyssa Tobias and Emma Archambault." Charlie?
Janine approached me yesterday about this. She's, I guess, away right now. One, she would like this to be like a temporary, maybe 3-month experiment to see if this works out. Two, I think she's sort of implied that she would like to oversee this to make sure it doesn't impede egress access to the building and that it's kept in an orderly fashion. So if the board wanted to make a motion that it's only for 3 months and that Janine's responsible to oversee it, I would go along with that.
So I think that this had come up when we had donations for the cat, was it the cats or
Oh,
something?
yes, the cat issue
Monroe.
came up.
You know, it turned into who's going to collect the stuff and how long is it going to be here and a couple of other issues, I think, which Janine is implying. So I have no issues with letting the girls collect food. I think if it becomes an issue, then Janine will let us know, and then at that point, well, maybe we need to talk to them, but I don't.
And it's non-perishable foods.
Yes.
My only concern is the length of time, and one does it, we get to all do them. So I think if we look at all these and say, okay, you can do it, but it's for this period of time, then you need to take it out, another group comes along, we do.
So
this.
maybe we need to come up with a policy for that in the future. At this point, we can put a 3-month limit on here. And
Just see
I'm
where we're
fine.
at.
Yeah.
so I would accept a motion to approve the request from the Girl Scouts for the food drive at Town Hall for 3 months.
Why 3 months? Is
What?
that too long? I mean, maybe a month? Because if we get a lot of people, asking to do the same thing.
How often do we have requests at Town Hall for this kind of
But I
stuff?
mean,
I'm
if
just
you do,
wondering,
I'm
right.
just saying, if you do,
Well, when Janine and I talked about it, we were thinking about Thanksgiving and food drives that occur at
So you'd
Thanksgiving.
want this to end before then?
We wanted it to end before then, and it would allow us time to take and let it go over if we wanted to. But it would give us a pause to take and review it, see if it works.
How long does it take to accomplish this bronze award? Does anybody know?
So Bronze Award is the first level of Girl Scout awards, bronze, silver, and then gold. It is the one where the youngest girls are able to get involved in this project. Charlie's laughing at me. And the project itself is usually at least 15 to 20 hours of service time. They have to do extensive applications ahead of time. It has to get approved by Girl Scout Council, and then they actually have to finish the project, do the review of the project, and submit all the documentation before they actually earn their bronze award.
So
And they
let's
had
say
to
they
do a lot
needed-
of work ahead of time before they could even apply.
So let's say they needed 15 hours, and you gave them 3 months, that's only 12 hours, right?
Well,
Say an hour a week.
perhaps the board may consider, saying, okay, we're going to put this in for 3 months for right now, and should we get to the point where you want to reapply and no one else is competing for that spot and everything goes well, they'd have the opportunity to do so. We want to try to encourage the scouts' participation in the town as much as possible.
I think one of the keys are, you said the project has to end before they can submit it. So if we don't put an end date on it, they're not gonna be able to end the project and submit it.
Well, they would just, once they get to their hours, they're going to submit it. They may have the benefit of saying, this has been such a wonderful project, we've been able to continue it on forevermore and establish something.
Mrs. Walunas?
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. You really want to address the 2 girls to see with being the bronze? Because I'm speaking from experience, our troop did a lot of work for something else. And then once they finished everything, they presented it to the Girl Scout Council, and they rejected it because it missed one thing. So if you're going to put a time limit on it, I would definitely check with the girls to see, are we meeting the requirement, or should we just not even bother doing it?
But if we vote tonight for the 3 months, that doesn't preclude them from coming back here and saying, we need 4,
Right,
5.
but I would let them know why, definitely let them know why you're saying 3 months, and not something that is going to benefit year-round.
I say we stick with the 3 months. They can always come back and ask for more
Ask
time.
For more time.
It's tough to do a good deed sometimes, you know?
Well, even if they didn't get their bronze award, which would be disheartening, they're still doing a great service to the community. So either way,
I think that's a good point. You wanna make the motion?
I thought we did.
She was asking for one.
I was asking for a motion to approve the,
I move that we approve their request with 2 stipulations. One, that the town clerk oversee and guide, and 2, that it be for a 3-month period.
is there a second?
second.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. We're going to pass over the conversation with George Zimborski and the HCOG. It's been moved to August 11th. Our next joint meeting is with the Conservation Commission to discuss the number of members. Charlie McDonald asked for this item to be placed on the Board of Selectmen's agenda. Mass general laws allow for conservation commissioners to have a varying number of members. Currently, the board has 7, which often makes it difficult for them to have a quorum. Mr. McDonald's here to speak to us about considering the reduction of membership. Hi.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yes, this is a preliminary discussion. It is not based on any uniform consensus yet developed on the Conservation Commission. And the issue it's trying to address, in principle, is the fact that we have trouble getting quorum on a number of our meetings. So we have 7 now. Reducing it to 5 would make that a little easier issue to address. But again, once the commission makes a decision and digests this idea, because there may be ramifications to it that some of us aren't aware of, we will be back. And the principal reason I'm here is to present you with some data associated with Mass General Law on the dynamics of the Conservation Commission, and also some tabulated data developed by Marla Hank of the relative numbers of members of the various commissions across most of Western Massachusetts, and we will probably be supplementing this. In general, the bigger towns have 7, the smaller towns have 5. So basically, I'm here just to present this concept and to develop a consensus with the commission and to address the issue of trying to get in a reasonably consistent way, without making phone calls at 7:10, a quorum at some of our meetings where the residents are in attendance.
Has the Conservation Commission discussed this as a whole?
Not as a whole, only 5. We had 4 at the last meeting. It was discussed then. I've talked also on the phone with one more, but we have to get a consensus of all 7's opinion about this idea.
So then my next question would be, how would you decide who of those 7 wouldn't be on the board anymore? Like, based on,
That's something
attendance?
the select board would make a decision on. You could do it with attrition. There's a number of people who are really committed with their jobs and family and having difficulty coming. They may volunteer to resign. Those are the kinds of processes you probably would go through, but that would be a decision of the select board.
Okay.
Yeah, two questions, Charlie. Do you meet monthly?
We meet twice a month,
Twice a month, okay.
2 hours, 3 hours each meeting.
And do you think with 5 members, you're going to be able to get the skill sets you need? Because obviously it's an important
I think
mission.
we could, yes, and as, yes, I think we could, yes.
Okay.
Art?
Art Lawrence, 113 Cricket Ledge Road. Just a few comments on the Conservation Commission. I've been on it for a number of years, not as many as Charlie. When you have folks showing up at less than, some are 40%, some are less than 60%, and almost 0% on site visits, that's a pretty bad situation. I mean, at least we should have quorums when we go out for site visits, and we never do. There's always the 3 of us that go out, and we really never have anybody else. So I think this is a good way of handling it. It does require some expertise as far as taking courses and so on and so forth, and we have members of the commission who have never taken the courses. So I think it's time to straighten this out and get a more vibrant Conservation Commission again. Thank you.
Are there any, clear ramifications of making this change? Negative ramifications of making this change?
Well, yes, one would be that it limits the discussion if you have a cadre of people of a specific perspective, and they dominate the vote. I think this even gets worse if you only have 3 on a commission, but that's one potential issue, the range of experience the people have associated with the town. These things, and also should be noted that the Conservation Commission has, in addition to the simple administration of the law, they have all this stewardship issue. You work with the Greenway Committee and the Friends of the Greenway, and you work with some skilled volunteers to help us get grants, and you need some skilled volunteers to get grants. So those kinds of processes really can overwhelm the amount of work that we do as a commission. It's been suggested that this property that the town owns, that the Conservation Commission is supposed to be managing, and that's observed more in the breach than active participation in a number of the properties. It's been suggested that a land trust be set up in some format, and the legalities associated with that would not like to address. I think it's fairly complicated, but those are the kinds of things. We are a land trust as well as a Conservation Commission. So these are the things we have to address, that's all. And once we have a consensus, we'll be back and we'll present our ideas. But it is a major structural change. 5 members, like the planning board, it will be different, and all the ramifications should be digested. But I do have the review of Mass General Law here, and also a summary, it's not complete yet, but the summary of the neighboring communities and the number of members that they have, commissioners they have, and it's approximately 50-50 with 7 and 50.
Do you need this back, Charlie? Okay, thank you. So do you need a vote from us?
Nothing,
Not
nothing.
tonight,
I just wanted
know
to
that it's
churn the
coming.
soil
Okay.
and anticipate a response from the commission as a whole.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Are there any other questions before Mr. McDonald leaves? Mrs. Lunas?
I'm sorry. Since there's only 5 people on that committee, or 7,
7 now.
are you training anybody of a younger generation to know what you guys are doing? So that, heaven forbid, something happen and it goes to just 5?
That's right.
I think
There
that's
are
the
issues
predicament a
like
lot of people are in.
Because the consistency of the professionalism on the Conservation Commission hasn't been uniform. And I think the question that Tammy has brought up is to get people and to recognize it in the community that we are overwhelmed, and people who really want to commit to helping us fool around with these, maintain these properties, and that kind of stuff, as well as learning the complex law, because it is complex, and typically the chair ends up with maybe 7 calls a week at any time for people who have issues that's independent of maybe another 3 emails that require going to the files and discussing with them issues. So it's not a trivial, and the concept of this district local technical assistance program that we applied for and the program disappeared, that was to get a part-time conservation agent with Easthampton, the 2 of us together, and getting sufficient funds for that part-time position. And that kind of structure, I think, independent of the number of commissioners, that kind of structure would be extremely helpful for consistency. We are developing our protocols, the format we use for various issues that we have to address. We have those documented, but and it's part of the collected wisdom now of the commission, but it can disappear. It can disappear.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It's a disheartening answer.
Yeah. When you say maintain the conservations,
Properties,
the properties,
600 acres.
are you looking also at the scouts, or Boy Scouts, Girl
Yes,
Scouts?
yes, we have
community
lists of
service
projects.
from-
Yes, we have lists of projects, and we'll utilize any volunteers that we can get. And we'd like to have control over it too, to make sure it's done, in a way that's good and stable for all the residents when they use the properties.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Heather?
All right, so I have a few updates for the board. Over the past couple weeks, we've actually experienced numerous issues with our HVAC system here at Town Hall. We've had SNE on the premises numerous times to the point where I think we all know them by first name. Always fun. A couple of the issues we were having, one of the units kept tripping, and then we had another issue where, for whatever reason, when they had installed the sensors back in, when the building was redone, they had put the sensors too close to the actual AC unit. So the AC unit was blowing on the sensor, which told the building it should turn on the heat because it was really cold. So we got that fixed, had those sensors moved. That cost a little bit of service time, I imagine, and we're going to be billed for it. We ran into an issue last week where one of the pumps that actually, the unit itself takes in the air and produces, the moisture comes out of it and goes through the pump and then goes up a tube and out. And the problem was the pump that was installed actually failed. So for the first time in what I've ever known as history, we had a flood in the basement. So that was a interesting and scary experience all at the same time. We had them out here the next day. They replaced the pump and they replaced the tubing. I think between the two of them, the parts cost $100 and some change to fix. We're going to have them replace a couple more of the pumps and tubing that were in similar situations. They haven't failed yet, but we like to keep it as never as opposed to yet and just be on the safe side with those. We're hoping with these additional adjustments and with having all the sensors moved that we won't have any additional issues going forward this year on that matter. Other things going on, we're still under contract with them for another year. I talked to the woman at S&E yesterday, so we're good until next year, and then we can see what we want to do for our service contract for the following 3 years at that point. We've also had a couple of things with the boilers going on. Apparently a couple weeks ago, there was an issue where people thought they smelled gas in the building. There was not gas in the building. Fire department came over numerous times to clear it. HG&E was called. They came over and cleared it. They ended up having to call the boilers. Apparently the boilers were emitting a smell, and with the windows open because the HVAC system wasn't working, the smell was then getting inside the building and had the thought of gas, or that's what people were thinking. That has been resolved in the boilers. Workers were actually here today, earlier. Any questions on the HVAC system at that point?
SNE is for who?
SNE is the company who services our HVAC system.
They didn't install it by chance?
They did not install it.
Is there any warranty still in existence? Because if they put the thermostats
They
too
believe
close-
not.
It's over 5 years.
Is it over 5 years? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So the next issue, or next thing we have going on is phones. Art will be walking around with the gentleman from the phone company we had previously talked about before that provides the voice over internet service, just to go around, survey what we actually have for phones that we can convert and all the details so we can get an accurate number of how much it would cost, which ones we have to keep on landline, et cetera, et cetera. And he's also going to put together a troubleshooting list of concerns that the board had expressed at the last meeting, so he can address those. Next thing is animal control officer. Last meeting, the Board of Selectmen voted to extend the agreement for a year. Right now, we're kind of in between with the Westfield folks because they have a city council meeting. They do not meet during summer session, so their next meeting is the end of August, so they have to sign it. They have no problem extending another temporary agreement until they can get that signed. So we won't lose coverage at all, which is a good thing. And as far as I know, we have yet to use it, which is also a good thing. It's nice to have something in place and not need it. Other things we have going on, Code Red. We have utilized Code Red numerous times over the past several months, including to alert people of the elections. And we have got great feedback from folks that they had the information, they knew where they were going and when they were going. They seem to be very happy with that. I've spoken with numerous department heads over the past couple weeks. We had a department head meeting last week. We also had a board committee commission meeting. From the department head and also speaking with the individual department heads, there's a lot of concern over feeling overwhelmed as a department head right now and having too much work that they just can't keep up with. Part of it's a staffing issue. If not all the departments are fully staffed like they once were. The other part is right now there's no administrative support in any of your major departments. My office is without a paid administrative support person right now and has been since April, and we're working on that. You have the same thing over at the highway department. The police department has gone without administrative support for a long time. They used to have someone helping out, but with budget constraints, they can't even have that this year. Fire department, I have not spoken with him directly, but I would imagine he's in no better shape on that piece. So there's a lot of concern that we need to look moving forward, that if we want department heads to be able to function and do all of their managerial duties, we need to get some support in for the administrative piece. Whether it's volunteers or something in another capacity, perhaps there's a way to do a combined position, for instance, for the police and for the fire, so they can share an administrative staffing person, help with payroll. They have two of the most complex payroll systems going in addition to the highway department, which is It takes them a lot of time every other week to put things together. They do not have an automated system. They have to manually enter, okay, was this overtime? Okay, do we have to bill someone for you going out to do detail? All right, did you work during the day at the fire department? Are you on call? Over at the highway department, did you do work for water? Is this a park billing piece? Did you work overtime? So they have all these different pieces to put in, and it changes when they have stipends through union contracts and other things that they have to consider. Okay, well, because you're doing this at this point and you're officer in charge, now you get whatever percentage it is increase. So it's very complex, and they're struggling quite a bit. That's also one of the reasons you're not seeing them reach out right now for a lot of grants. They don't have time. They can barely keep up with the administrative paperwork. It's also why I expressed earlier my concern of them coming in for more time, because they already feel like they can't keep up. A lot of them have been coming in on the weekends and extra hours and staying late into evenings just to be able to get done the payroll and the bills that they've had. So talking with the boards, committees, commissions, and department heads over the past couple weeks, we've been reviewing different things over open meeting law, including information over minutes, making sure all the minutes are typed properly and had the correct details and the right number of details. Same thing with the agendas, going over posting things, and also going over different ethics pieces. And I find that the boards, committees, and commissions, as well as the department heads, seem to find it very helpful to review some of this information that they may, although they have in front of them, may not have particularly paid great attention to. So you have copies in your packets as board members of the last agenda that we utilized for both of those with that information if you wish to review it. And I'm also happy to take any suggestions of things you wish me to review with boards, committees, and commissions and department heads moving forward. I think they were both very helpful meetings going over that stuff. We have a volunteer in my office right now who's getting community service hours, so we're getting some filing caught up on, which is very nice. And I think that is pretty much all I have for today, unless there's any questions. John?
We just got a notice from the director of the senior center saying that she had a volunteer that was looking to volunteer, and is there any takers? No, she had an engineering background, but she also, I believe, had some more office type of background. I mean, are we looking to these folks for volunteers too?
We are. Actually, I spoke with Art the other day, and I think Tom, to talk to them about sitting down, seeing if she'd be interested in interviewing with them. I think that would be a really good fit, and it would also alleviate some of the pressure from Art in trying to currently carry around 2 phones and do all IT stuff at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say, we found out a lot of the senior citizens who aren't working anymore and retired, two folks right here in the room, have been very valuable. I mean, are there others like that that may be willing to volunteer, and we can put out some kind of notice?
I'd be more than happy to put out a notice on Facebook, be more than happy even to do a code red call as time goes on and search.
Any other questions for Heather? Are there any select board updates or liaison reports?
Yeah, could I ask a couple of questions? I don't know if they fit in here, but we were supposed to be sending a letter out to Easthampton Savings Bank, thanking them for the furniture and all that.
Did that go out, Heather?
We sent out the first one, we haven't sent out a second one.
We also drafted a letter for Caleb and Beanet.
That went out weeks and weeks ago.
Okay, I don't know, that's what I'm asking. All right, that was my curiosity.
Anybody else?
A question, and I'm going to put it here because that's the only place I can think of. Obviously, the last week we had the votes, and the votes came in.
It's on the agenda.
Where is it? Oh, okay. Scratch that then.
It's there.
Would you like an update on some of the projects I've been playing with?
Sure.
Well, I mean, you know.
It's your turn.
I'm trying to secure quotes for the heating units for the roof. I'm hoping to have some numbers by the middle of August. Once we get those numbers, then we're going to have to sit down and try to figure out how we're going to pay for this. I've gotten some preliminary quotes on the handrail for the front sidewalk of the town hall, and that's coming in at less than $8,000, but I'm going to try to get some more quotes on that, so that's moving forward. I guess that's it.
In regards to the handrails, have you reached out to any local technical schools, metal fab departments that may be willing to help out with that?
I haven't, actually. No.
Same thing with any other local small projects, a lot of times the local tech departments are willing to take stuff on with
Yeah, I mean,
two schools in the area. It's also within driving distance, so if they do co-ops and things.
yeah,
it
no,
can
it's a
help.
good point. I could go to Smith, or I could go to Westfield Volk, I mean, yeah. No.
Any other questions, comments? Open time for the public.
Michael Rosenberg, Chair of the Finance Committee, 144 East Street. I had a couple questions. I'll try to make it brief. So my first one is, how does the department send a communication to the select board to appear on the agenda? Because we have sent 2 memos, and I'm not completely familiar with the process, so I want to make sure what we send in hopes of discussion can make it to a public forum. So what is the process? Do I just ask to be put on the agenda? I know I did put on there I think if our presence was needed, or if there are any questions, or if we were requested, please let us know. I never heard back on either memos.
Where did they go to?
They went to the select board email and the town administrator.
Right.
So Heather would be the point person.
So I had said to, we had talked about this briefly, and although we get them all, unless one of us says put it on the agenda, or they request to be put on the agenda, sometimes they
Don't get put on the agenda.
don't get put on the
So
agenda.
you send an email, do you say, I'd like to be put on the next agenda, or?
They were communications. I didn't specifically say to be put on the agenda, but I think I had a line in there about if our presence is needed to discuss, please
Right.
advise.
So I guess if you want to be put on the agenda,
Specific.
say it up front.
Okay, so I want to hit some of those points as of right now, just because I feel they were important. They've happened in the last month. First, and this is a reiteration from the first memo we had sent on June 3rd, just copies of any and all grants, full copies, to help alleviate some of our issues. Charlie's going to help us with our
I'm working.
with our current
Have you gotten
one.
any?
I know Vicky, Council on Aging.
That was it?
I know Vicky has some, but there's never been anything presented to us as, this is the file, these are the grants, this is where you can do your research for the funding use of these. So
Okay.
we've still not heard anything on that.
Now, whose task is that, and who should it be assigned to? Because that should be just a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. If somebody needs it, they can just forward it.
Well, I think a copy of the full grant would need to come from the department head, right?
Who's responsible for going to the department head, getting that, making sure, following up on it? That's, I guess, the big question.
Well, we did request them, correct?
We did request them, but I would say that's something that's held in the accountant's office. I don't get those documents at all, so I wouldn't know what came in. But as the accountant, I would imagine, she's got to enter in an account for a grant to spend out of, or revenues coming in, then she's the one who should and would want the information to begin.
Can we task the accountant with that formally?
The accountant is your employee, so.
Yeah, because unless we task somebody formally with it, we may not get it, because everybody's got so much to do.
So you want her to collect, she should have them anyway.
She should be the owner of the document, and she should collect it. And if she can't collect it, because the department head's refusing, she can go to Heather. If that doesn't work, come to us.
And then get them to the finance committee.
And to be honest, our goal of this is not to have a stack of grants and to peruse and look at every single one, but just when questions come up during budget season, it's readily accessible. We can find the information, and we don't wait
Right.
months.
So we should know that, too.
Correct. You should know where that information is if you have a question.
It should be just a file of all the approved grants,
Yeah.
Correct. Or a spreadsheet, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
Something. The second item I had here was the ambulance monitor. We had met and discussed that. There were no meeting minutes posted, so I wasn't sure if that went before the last meeting and if it was discussed and agreed upon. I know we made us, Charlie, the fire chief, sat down and deliberated and kind of came to what we thought was a good idea. Was that discussed and voted on?
Yes.
At our last
Do we have it on
meeting.
our agenda?
It was on the last meeting. I think the one thing that was confusing, or at least I know I was confused by it, when the treasurer got the information from U.S. Bank to fill out for pertaining to the lease and direct withdrawal of the amounts monthly, The confusion was, there were two options. One was under the 60-month plan, and the other one was on the 30, I think it was a 30-month plan. Or 36, was it 36?
I was gonna say
It was one of the 2 months.
48 or something, but yeah,
Yeah,
lesser. Yeah.
But, so I was for some reason under the impression that it was a 36-month, but it appears that the paperwork was processed for the 60-month, which I wasn't aware, but I don't know if the board was.
That's what the 60 months was what I was aware of, because the chief said right around $600, and that was the monthly amount for the
Correct.
60 month.
And that's what we had recommended in the
Right.
memo we had sent along as well, was the 60-month, because you're paying less, and if funds become available.
And the interest was so small.
Correct, exactly.
I had one question about it last week that I don't think we had an answer to, and maybe I didn't ask it, but when you had the conversation with the chief about this, did he say how much time Westhampton had given him, that they were taking their monitor back? It just seemed like this whole situation was very rushed, and I wondered if we knew how much time
I
the
think
chief had given us to take it. I mean, we knew it was going to be taken back. We knew that when we borrowed it. We knew at some point we were going to have to give it back, but I'm just wondering if we knew.
So a little history, I know when we did the budget review, a cost of a new monitor was discussed with the finance committee, and we'd asked the question, why do you want a new monitor? Oh, we're borrowing a monitor. When's the monitor going to back? And at that point, it was essentially a forever borrow. There was no implication of when it needed to go back. I think there was a change in status for Westhampton that required them to take their second monitor back. Now, whether it was a positive or negative change, I don't know, but it was a change that forced them to take that back.
I know the chief had told me a while ago, we have it on loan until they want it back, and that is open-ended, and appeared they wanted it back.
Yep. And, I mean, with the plus sign of leasing the new monitor, you will essentially have two brand-new monitors. The other one, I think, is 2 years old, so it's, you're in a better situation at this point, because the other one was much older. We discussed the E911. My next question here, which was on the second memo, was department, individuals, I guess, raises in departments. Where do we stand with those? Are we paying the individuals who have put in for higher salary amounts? Is there a policy being discussed to address those? In particular, the water superintendent, there was a Board of Health raise put in. The principal assessor also put in a raise as well. Are we paying those? Are we not paying those? What is the status?
The water superintendent did receive their raise. The principal assessor, I want to say did, but is since left the position, so really it's a moot point now.
Okay.
And the Board of Health, I feel like it's an ongoing issue, and I don't think they put in for a raise.
They attempted to get funds
From, right,
Right, it was a $4,000
right,
change.
that part has not,
Okay, so nothing has come up from that? Okay.
no.
On the point of the water department, and this goes with some of the other issues as well. So we had originally asked during their budget review with, it's Tom, I think, the representative from the water department, are there any raises in your budget? And he said no. And he said no because he did not know that a raise was put into that budget. How is a department head, a department leader, unaware that raises are being put into their budgets? Who's putting in the raise? Is it a self-directed raise? If it's self-directed, then why are we even here, essentially, right? It means that the assessor, the accountant, the treasurer, everyone should be able to put in their own raise. So as we stressed in the memo, and as I will stress here, that you really need to develop a policy to lock down on these. First of all, an enterprise fund is not, it's not their own private pot of money. An enterprise fund is an accounting practice. It's still municipal funds. It's taxpayer dollars. It's subject to your appropriation. It's subject to your review. You can say, no, we are not going to appropriate that money. So I would just like to stress that going forward, we really look at these things. You know, we talk about the billing. Well, it's a change in look. It's dollars and cents to a town that needs dollars and cents. So it's just something that should really be looked into. I mean, I have also forwarded some enterprise fund resources, or reading resources off to you, which I hope you forwarded to other groups to read. They were very informative. It was the MGL, so Mass General Law, and then just another consulting firm that kind of did a point-by-point review of enterprise funds, what they're used for, what they shouldn't be used for, who really manages it, which is, you know, they operate the fund, but you control the money. So just keep that in mind when somebody uses the, oh, it's an enterprise fund, you can't do anything with it. It's not true. Also, sure.
Art Lawrence, Chairman of the Personnel Board. I'd like to reiterate what Mike's saying. I mean, this stuff is coming out of the woodwork, and it's getting ridiculous. Nobody's following the rules. We have bylaws. We don't get PCFs. All of a sudden, and please tell me how this person gets a 2% raise after being here 9 months. It's not in his contract. I looked at his contract. So I'd like to know how this all happens. And not just that, that's just one example, but we're seeing it everywhere. Literally every day I'm getting inundated by these type of things. And PCF, we have a person retired in the Water Commission. Did we get a PCF? No. And then we're told the person is hired as a 1099 independent contractor. I have a gentleman here that will definitely refute that one, and maybe, Jim, you want to come up and say something about that? Another member of the Personnel Board, Jim Palermo.
Jim Palermo, Glendale Road. It's been my experience that we use terms to describe various employees. We do it informally. But under the law, there are very specific definitions of what constitutes a professional employee, a supervisory employee, a managerial employee, and an independent contractor. I have not looked at great length at what's going on in the water department, but based on what I do know, he does not meet the definition of an independent contractor. Just give me one factor being an independent contractor is a person hired to perform a task that is not an integral part of the employer's business. Being the superintendent or supervising the water department is an integral part of what the town does. He is not a 1099 independent contractor. I would suggest also that while, excuse me, that while private corporations sometimes test the law, as a governmental entity, we should not be doing that, because we are asking people to comply with the laws that we enforce. We don't want somebody to forget getting a permit to remodel their basement because they're testing us. I mean, we require by-the-letter compliance with the law. And so the issues of whether a person is a professional employee come before us. The 1099 issue has not come up before us directly, but I would suggest to you that there are very precise definitions under the Fair Labor Standards Act and under Mass General Law. And so we're not being nitpickers with the Personnel Board, but it just really seems that, and I'm speaking of myself, not I'm part of the board, that we're going in all directions here. We really need a tight management system. We all have to realize that we're not fighting each other. We all want the best fire department, the best police department, the best water department, but we want to work cooperatively towards those ends. And we're not going to get there if people are going to take shortcuts and disregard the law. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to hit on also, just to come back to the meeting with the auditors and to kind of reinforce something that Mike said and then Art also. One of the findings in the audit report is that we don't have documentation of pay raises. That's a serious, that's how some of the stuff, everybody said, well, who did it?
Is that the
Nobody
spreadsheet
knows.
that they had spoke about last year, having a list of where everybody started, what the raises were, all of that? That's the same issue they thought that they brought up last year, but I was under the impression that Donna was working on it because we had had a conversation about it.
We are working on it, but the problem comes down to the same notion, which is, you know, in years past, and you're seeing it now, for instance, with things like Tom getting the raise over in the water department, things like that. I think we've since corrected it with the paperwork, but there should be a paper trail. If every member of a union gets a raise, there should be a piece of paper for each independent person saying, per contract, this is your new pay. If there's no paper, the treasurer's office is not changing the rate of pay. They're not doing, if it's not approved, they're not changing the rate of pay. They can't. They can't. That's what we got into problems with before, where we all of a sudden, no one realized that there was a raise or something coming through because they just assumed that was the right amount and they had oversight on the piece of paper. If there's not an approved PCF right now, unless the board directs the treasurer's office otherwise, they are not changing the rate of pay.
Mike? Oh, Charlie.
I hear them, and I think the best thing to do at this point in time is we schedule a meeting with the water commissioners to have them legitimize why they did what they did. And I think we should do this in August.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, what's done is done, but I think the bigger issue that,
It's,
Not what's done is done, no.
well, you're not going to take a raise that you gave them away.
Was it illegally
Yeah,
appropriated?
if it wasn't done properly. I'm more concerned with the conflict of interest ethics
We all voted
violation.
yes on it.
We all voted no.
Well, I didn't, but, I mean,
We were voted under false precedents, correct? Because
Right.
we'd asked the question, were there any raises involved, and we were told no.
Yeah.
well, the question on the table is simply bringing them here to have a discussion. You're trying to make a conclusion on what that discussion's gonna bring. I want feedback from them as to what they have to say.
You're suggesting waiting till August and continuing to pay him at a higher rate that was not.
Well, the reason I'm suggesting that is that because, as everyone knows now, I'm gonna be out of the country for a while.
sorry. We all voted on the raise. We had the conversation. So I understand what you're saying. It came before us. We had the conversation, and to backpedal now, I think it comes down to this is a bigger issue. There are elected people in positions who are not following the rules. I mean, we could sit here and you could sit here and name them, which probably isn't appropriate. But people need to know that there are people that they voted for to be in positions that are not acting appropriately. And so whether or not that person got a raise or not, it's happening in that department, it's happening in other departments, and people are skirting around and trying to figure out shortcuts to get what they want. And it's not okay. And that is the bigger issue.
And I agree with you, but if we don't bring those boards in and have these discussions,
I mean, you can try, and I think we all have, to get them to meetings. They don't show up. So that's the thing. People need to know they voted these people in, and they're not acting in the best interest of the town. So you can send them a memo and ask them to come. Chances are, they're not going to come.
Well, then we need to discuss it in public and put it out there. I mean, if somebody that was working for the town in a capacity retired and came back in that same or similar capacity, because, again, unless that person is in the routine, his routine job or business is doing this, he's not a 1099 type of employee, and there's an ethics violation because you
Has that
can't...
issue come, that issue hasn't come to us yet, though, right?
I haven't
The
brought that up
1099 hasn't come to
yet.
the PQB. Is this in the very beginning?
We're aware of it. I had a long list.
Okay.
But we're aware of it now. So why don't we request bringing the commission board in and discussing this in a public forum? And if they refuse, then there's more issues there, I think.
That's fine.
When's the next meeting here, right, Charlie? I mean, you don't have to be here if you don't want to be, but I don't think we should wait too long.
August 11th.
Do you want to be here for that?
August 11th is fine unless you really don't want me to be
The
here.
next
August
meeting
11th
is
is
July
good.
28th, but the next one, Charlie,
You're on the
as far
11th?
as I know, will be at.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Oh,
Hopefully
August
full
11th is
board.
good with me.
So you would like to invite who to that meeting?
The water commissioners.
Didn't we discuss this at that last meeting, and there was a motion and a second to not have him have a raise, and then he put in for it anyway? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we had discussed this. I
Yeah.
mean, this isn't new news.
Right,
No.
but then all of a
This came
sudden it
up
went
2
through,
weeks ago. This came up
Yeah, it was
last
signed,
fiscal
the
year.
PCF was signed, yes,
and it was voted to give him a raise?
yes, by this board.
Oh, because I remember making the motion to not, and I swear it was seconded. But then it was approved and signed
As
and
far
put
as I
forth?
know, it was approved.
Heather can look
We
it up.
spoke against
Can you
it.
check?
The Finance Committee spoke against it.
Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's very
No,
possible.
I'm just questioning,
Well,
because I
I mean-
remember this conversation.
It's still going to be good to meet with them. We want to talk to them about finance issues, revenues, everything anyways. So bringing one of the large departments in here for a discussion is only going to be good.
And I think if we voted on something, not having all the information or the total background means that we can bring it up again. You know, if we made an error, let's correct the error. I mean, because you got away with it once, doesn't mean it's the right thing.
The final thing I want to add, and this is not a reflection from the Finance Committee, this is just of my personal volunteerism for the town, is we talk about the Conservation Commission having a lack of young bodies. The management of this town is not conducive for younger generations to volunteer, because it is very, stopgap-ish. You come in and you can't get somewhere on things. You can't get anywhere. There's we've done it that way for years type of attitude on a lot of things. So just keep in mind that with the Conservation Commission, for an example, 5 years go by, if things don't change, your commission will slowly shrink due to moving to Florida, retiring, other worse things, right? So,
But I'm gonna say, there's enough young bodies out there, to use your term, that are willing to take the challenge and say, hey, I want to go help this and change it. It's not for the shy, for sure, but I mean, if somebody really wants to make a change and get into it, I think they'll stick their foot in there. I remember Brianna Eichstad, who jumped into the health department and all that stuff. She was just a ray of sunshine and, young person with new experiences and all this. We need more like that. Not that us elder statesmen. Yeah, but you're right. It's got to be conducive. But how do you make it conducive?
change the policies and practices that are going on.
But if you've got the older folks on the committees who control the policies and practices, you're kind of in a catch-22. Somebody needs to step out or somebody needs to step up. And Jim may have a thought.
That is all I have.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Still Jim Palermo. This might seem trite, but I really believe that if we assume the attitude of fixing problems and not fixing blame, that the town would be well served. It's my impression that this town, the people who are volunteering are giving huge amounts of time. I really think they're all motivated by good intentions. They want the town to function. And what's lacking really is direction and leadership. And that's not against you. It's just the way the town is structured. In my mind, we're too small, or too big to be run by volunteers, and too small to afford to pay people. So it has to be a spirit of cooperation and people realizing, we're not stepping on your toes. We want to make this town better. We've got issues here that have to be solved. So let's solve the problems, fix the problems, not the blame. And I think that goes a long way in the way we approach people and deal with the issue.
I guess I'm going to disagree a little bit with you that it doesn't start here. I think it does, and we need to take some of the blame to trickle down.
Just being polite.
And I appreciate that, but I think we need to realize it too,
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. Who determines when code red messages go out?
Heather?
So why was one done for a missing dog?
Was or was not?
There was one.
Yep, I got it.
A phone message went out on texts, on emails, on phones, on business phones, on...
I didn't get that one.
I didn't get that.
I got one phone call. I didn't get a text or
Must have
anything.
been a vicinity thing.
Yes, it was over at Red Brook.
Well, I don't think that we pay per call anyway.
Okay,
So-
I love the important things being sent out. I just thought,
Well, somebody thought their dog missing was really important.
no, well, it was a dog found, and they were trying to find the owner. And yeah, they did, but I think that would have been better off in Facebook, under the town website or something, not a code
Want
red.
to use the code red?
Yeah,
And a question, Heather's not here on the code red.
So code-
Killing me.
We'll use the rainbow.
I would too.
My cat.
Heather, we were talking about code red, and correct me if I'm wrong, but
Right.
when the code reds go out, they come from a number that's unrecognizable. Yeah, and I almost don't pick those up because there's always somebody trying to get you. Is there a way to put a
When
name
people
on it?
initially sign up for it online, it tells you the numbers you should be adding to your caller ID. We can look them up, and I guess we can put it on the Facebook and the website so people know what numbers they are.
Okay, so it's the same number all the time?
I believe it's one or two numbers that they
So if we know what they are,
utilize.
we can assign it a title?
And it does leave a voicemail, so.
Oh, I know it, but, okay, so if you can maybe post those so we can do that, thanks.
Heather, did you know about the code red message that went out about a found dog?
Yes. Not the found dog, the dog that was found and needed a home, yes.
No, the one in Red Brook that was found.
Yes. It was geographical. So one of the options we have when I sent out the code red message, it was a Friday night, I got a call at home. So what we tried to do is we actually, with the dog thing, like if there's a water main break, we try to localize the call to the best of our ability. So we say, okay, if this is the point where it's at, and we believe, within a mile, we try to do a mile radius, so it's not affecting the whole town. We only provide the information someone gives us.
That's why other people do it. Okay.
Yes, and the dog, we did end up locating the owners through the code red call, so it was very, very effective.
So I just want to go back to one thing in the vote for the water superintendent. I was wrong, so you can all write that down. But Shannon made the motion. This was on June 16th. These are approved minutes, correct? Shannon made the motion not to sign the PRF for the raise, and it was voted 3-1 not to sign. Charlie was absent, and Jackie voted no. So it was not approved.
So will somebody be reviewing the?
Let's check and, yep, that would be an excellent idea. So we need to check and make sure that that did not go through.
So that opens the other question. If it didn't go through, and it hasn't happened, is there a need to meet with the water commissioners
Yes.
Yes.
because of
It's
the
the
process? Okay.
Yes.
And maybe the process itself isn't specific water commissioner, maybe it's other departments as well.
Right.
Correct, so if it's just process alone, maybe it's more department-wide.
Wide.
To
not
discuss
one-
the process, not
exactly.
necessarily water department, but
Yeah, I have no
Right.
problem with meeting with them, discussing this. I just want to make sure that everyone understands why.
Right. Okay. Anybody else for open time for the public? Oh, okay.
Can I backtrack a little bit?
Sure.
One of the other things that we discovered is we now have an electronic copy of all the plans for this building, and Art has those in his possession, if he can remember where he put them.
The floor is yours.
My usual day to be like this. My name is Mary Weedmore. I work for Cecilia Holyoke. I'm their forester. And I came here tonight sort of on the advice of your highway department boss, Randy, because Holyoke is going to reactivate their forest management program in your town. And they own a lot of road frontage. So we're proposing a project off of Old Crooked Ledge Road and Fulmer, where they join. And I met with Randy, and we walked the site, and he had some good feedback about signage and, and the fact that he wants us to maintain the established width of that road in the 1800s, so 50 feet. So I did do that. We've been painting the timber, getting it ready for sale, and I just completed the harvest cutting plan, which a copy does go to your Concom, and a copy goes to the state of Mass for approval. And Randy thought it would be, he's been working with me, but he said, he would feel better if I came and let the board know what was going on, because everything that he has to approve has to be approved, is how he said it, I'm pretty sure. And so, really, we just want to let you know that it's going to be more active than it's been out in that area. We will be putting a landing off of Crooked Ledge Road for this first project. It's really in the kind of early phases. I need to do the state permitting, a review by Natural Heritage, and we're proposing to maybe start cutting late fall. And they sort of switched their approach. They brought our firm on, and we advocate a certain style of forest management that doesn't remove more than 25%. It's using the forest as a filter to purify the water. And so we don't cut aggressively. But area-wise, through the next maybe 7 years, we'll be cutting a lot in your town. And what my approach is to get to know the community, because we're going to be using your highways. We're going to be in your community. So what I'm going to do is, once the sale is approved and permitted, I'm going to have a public hike out there, just so that, especially the neighbors who have to live there with the truck traffic, let them know what we're doing, and that it's a part of a long-term plan for the city of Holyoke's stewardship of their forest land. And at that point, it really is educational. I'm hoping to iron out all of your mandates or requirements for working in your town with your road boss, because that's really where we're going to be affecting your infrastructures, trucking off your roads. And so, yeah, we're in process. And he thought it would be a good idea to come and let you know who I was and what we're going to be doing, and answer any questions tonight. And as I say, we're just getting going, so I will do that public hike. And they just completed new management plans that they had funded by the Commonwealth. They got grants. So part of the grant is that they are required to do some community outreach, to take hikes in the forest, listen to your issues. The type of cutting I propose with that under 25% removals, there'll be a visual impact, but it shouldn't be a startling visual impact. What I'm preparing for the public presentations is a PowerPoint presentation that shows other projects I've done in other municipalities with this kind of rate of cutting, so that you're comfortable, or you have an awareness of what it's going to look like. And we're not really under a mandate. We just want to do it a little differently. When I look back in the history of the records, there seems to be, I don't know, not a really good relationship between Southampton and the city of Holyoke. So I'm trying to get to know who you are and let you understand what they're doing and why, and that.
Why do you get to cut the trees in our town?
Because the city of Holyoke owns the land in your town.
Oh.
Yeah. They own 4,300 acres of land in your town.
Go ahead, Art.
That's what Holyoke does. They just show up.
Oh, I was like,
That's why we don't like.
I got a little confused
Art
for a
Lawrence,
second.
113 Crooked Ledge Road. I can tell you why this town has not been happy with the great city of Holyoke. We supply Holyoke with all their water, I believe, from our dam, and I believe we get $65,000 a year in lieu of taxes. Now, that's a pretty damn good deal, I think. And I think it should be a lot more than $65,000, seeing that you're supplying a city of 48,000 or whatever the number is in Holyoke these days. Who gets the money for does the town of Southampton get any of this money that when you sell these logs to whatever loggers? And the other question is, please remember our bylaws, running trucks up and down. Remember and then weekends and things like that. We're very quiet up in that area. We're in the woods, and we would like to keep it quiet. So. The other thing, just one other thing, is the road is very bad on Crooked Ledge, especially up in my area. It was put down a couple years ago, and it was about an inch of asphalt, because that's all Ed Coley could spend at that time. So your big trucks are going to chew that road up like there's no tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah. they bought your land a long time ago, and they've been sucking your water
can-
out of Manhand for over 100 years. But I can't affect that, you know? I can understand a community's frustration about that wholeheartedly. I work for, most of my work's municipalities, and I hear this, Westfield, all their water comes from Granville, so I have to always mitigate this issue. So I can't really talk at that. But the road, the areas that we'll be using is down where it joins Foamer on this project.
Going forward.
Correct. Going out Foamer. And
then once you do the cutting, will you allow residents of Southampton to hike through your area?
well, and I'm even going to try to protect some of your trails. I can't protect all of them.
You can't get on any of that property.
Well, you're not supposed to be there. And I'm,
You can walk all around Holyoke's reservoir, but you can't walk around
well,
Southampton.
that's their primary, I mean, that's where their water comes from. I never throw people off. I see them all the time out there. I can't, like, welcome them and embrace them because that isn't what I'm told to do by the city, but I understand. I do.
May
And
I
there
ask,
is-
may I ask a couple of questions? First of all, Art, we also have an agreement, if memory serves, with the water department, that we get X amount of gallons of water per resident of Southampton from that reservoir.
But we have a treat, and we don't have a way.
That treat was caused by the EPA, not by
We can't
any,
use that water. But you're right, there are taps that we can take off. But
and we do treat, we treat at Gilbert Road, and we, I believe, treat down by Pequot too. But that said, we talking Delisle Road or Crooked Ledge Road? Because Delisle Road intersects Crooked Ledge and Former, and I think that's where your property is.
Well, our property, or the city of Holyoke's property, runs from behind that house right at the intersection of Delisle and Crooked all the way back down to
Right,
Homer. Yeah.
but it's Delisle and Crooked. That would give people a better reference, because when you say Crooked and Former, you're really down,
Well, you're in the discontinued, or I don't believe it's discontinued, I believe it's just closed.
no, you're not, I'm not talking about the White's Reservoir. When you go Crooked Ledge and Former Road, you're down towards the Searle Farms and everything else, and that's not the location.
they also own off of Wolford,
Yeah.
Lower Downs. They own all
But
that.
people listening to this are not understanding what you and me know, okay? That's why I'm saying Delisle Road is really the point of reference. My questions to you are this: you're using a state forester?
The way, the mechanism here is, I'm a private forester, I work for the city.
I understand.
We have to bring a proposal to the state forester.
Okay.
A harvest study plan, you map your resource, you map your mitigation of any kind of wetland or stream crossing. It goes to the state, they come out, walk your site. Oh, I'm sorry. The state forester walks the site and approves or disapproves your plan. So the
Okay.
state forester is our compliance
Officer of that. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So is the state forester in your proposal going to deal with with tops and brush, in the sense of, are you crushing it to the ground, or is this material going to be piled for wildlife?
Some will be piled. Actually, I've got a couple areas that I'm going to make habitat piles. The contract that I like to write calls for 2 feet and under, so that they have to lop their tops down within 2 feet of the ground.
Okay. My next question is, you're going to obviously have logging roads that are going to become more passable with this use and collection. Is it possible to take and put a GF map together that's a topographical map, so that the fire department can have reference, because that is an isolated area, and if they have forest fires out there, brush fires, whatever you want to call them, they'll at least have roads of travel as to get to the areas.
I can do that. I always
Gonna be
GPS all
mapping
my
it.
harvest roads. I map them anyways.
Right.
And you must have a GIS person for your town that could take that data, or somebody must do that. You got really great tax maps. Somebody did that.
That's all outsourced. But you know what, even if you could just print it and put it in the old simple Adobe,
Oh, okay, I can
okay?
do that.
Just so that they can do their overlays. I'm just thinking about the fact that if we do have a situation out there that requires fire, ambulance, whatever, they'll at least know these roads exist now, because once you start logging, they're going to exist. and it would just become a useful tool for them down the road.
I agree. I can do that. That's an easy one. About the 65,000, there is a rule on the books, and I have to do it for Westfield, West Springfield, South, all the other communities I work for, and I don't know why your town hasn't done it, but I think it's, if Heather can give me her email, I think it's Chapter 59A, where if a municipality owns municipal watershed lands in another municipality, they're by law mandated to give you 10% of their yield at every cut. And I don't think you've ever done that. I couldn't see anything about that in the record.
No, and I think that
And
it's
it's probably not, I probably shouldn't have even said that, but I'm sure my boss...
We sure are glad
if
you
my
did.
bosses
Give us
can
something
see
else
this,
to look
I'm
into.
totally in trouble. But we're using your roads. You're entitled to that 10%. You should pull the statute and hold us to that. And I will advocate for that through the process.
harvest collection.
So we don't have to.
Yeah, I've worked with state foresters before, some of the practices I've done, so I have some
So that
familiarity.
could be significant.
And it's
Well, to
pine.
us, it would be
It
significant.
would be significant. There are plans of, well, two things, your markets. Markets are,
Well, you're dealing with softwoods, right?
no.
You're
they
gonna be
have
dealing
a-
with hardwoods?
They have a lot of hardwood, and hardwoods are very strong on the local market right now,
Yeah.
and the global market. So the type of revenues that will come of this more active forest management program would be, I would consider them substantial if I got them. Yes, so.
Yeah.
And how you track it, and this is, if I was in your position, how I would track it is through that harvest cutting plan.
Right.
Because that's going to tell you the volumes that are going out, and that's how you could. But of course, the city will be honorable, and you'll just get your check, and you won't have to ever call, you know.
Does the Board of
But-
Selectmen mind if I act as a quasi-liaison to the Board of Selectmen to her?
Well, Randy's going to work with me, because he
Pardon?
really, he knows exactly how he wants, Randall, how he wants the roads left. And actually, our proposal, we're going to put a lot of, it could be a bane, I mean, we need to put trap rock on that, the muddy part of the road where it's, for some reason, the kids don't stay off it at times that they should. So it's all rutted, and we couldn't work on that, so we're going to fill all that in for you, and hopefully, well, trap rock's a little bit harder. It was just the dirt, the mineral soil, so it's been eroding heavily. And
So you're going to put this plan together, and then you'll have to come back, well, at least to Randall, and Randall have to keep us apprised? Is that how
he
this
and
works?
he kind of told me everything he wanted. He definitely wanted that 50-foot, that this is your land. And I guess if I need to cut a tree within that 50 feet, he would like me to come back, and you must have some protocol about your tree warden and cutting trees that are on town property. He wants me to go through that whole process so it's all documented. And I think we need to cut maybe 3 trees for our landing, because we want to be able to get a truck right up in there and gravel a nice pad. I'm trying to do the geometry to cut the least amount of trees, and he said to photograph it, and you have a whole process of filling out a paperwork, getting a public hearing, and so we will do that. Your Concom will get the finished harvest cut plan. They get it before it's approved, actually, and they have a 10-day period to review and comment on the process. So one thing I do offer is when I send it to the Concom, I always put a note that says I'm willing to walk the site with you for a review of the proposed project. And a lot of towns take me up on it. So then you know what's happening and where our impact on wetlands is. And we're going to be careful, because that's their intake out of the Manahan. So the earth is important. I mean, we can't go into a lot of areas just because they're too close. But that's why I came, and I will keep you posted, I guess. Or I'll definitely have to keep Randall posted, because we're working with him on how to get our roads set up and how to access your town road, all of that stuff.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think the idea of Charlie being our liaison with Randall makes a lot of sense, so that it comes to the meeting appropriately. So I don't know if we need a motion, but I'm in favor of it.
And I'm not looking at the roadway issue, I'm looking at the fact of if they are harvesting X amount of 1,000 feet of board feet, what is the percentage coming back? If they're laying out these roadways, how do we get the mapping so that we're, we know what's going on?
I don't have any problem with Charlie doing that, if somebody wants to make a motion.
What is your name, sir? Charlie?
I'm gonna do one, it's right there, there'd be.
I'll make the motion that Charlie is the board liaison for this project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
I'm just looking for the next part in this packet. Can somebody get Heather? Yeah, but she has the thing I'm supposed to read.
All of this?
2070 or so.
I don't have it. Yeah, I'm supposed to read that all out.
Here, we can have this
Thank
until
you.
she comes back.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on thank you very much, to the alcohol regulations for closing time. At the last meeting, there were numerous licenses before the Board of Selectmen for matters of discussion regarding serving of alcohol after closing time. The concern was that we didn't have in front of us a record of a policy by this board as to what time last call was, and the last time for drinks on the bar and patrons in the bar was. So before the board tonight is a draft policy that Heather's put together at the request of the board for review. The plan is to hold a public hearing at the next meeting to request feedback from owners as to this policy. So my first question is, have you all read this policy? It's in your packets.
So the copy that was in Dropbox was a little more extensive, and I simply took it from Cambridge. Cambridge has a great policy on their license commission. They're one of the license commissions out there that actually documents a lot of their policies. So I kind of borrowed theirs. The handout, which is attached to your agenda that's printed in your folder, is a slightly modified version that has some of the suggested times in here from town council. Liz and I did go over this literally line by line earlier with a few modifications and some things to discuss. Mostly, you're going to want to pay a lot of attention to 3, 4, and 5, which have numbers in them, meaning times. One of the frustrations, I think, right now that's being experienced by the licensees and the police department is the police department's under the understanding and the impression that if the license says 1 o'clock is closed, that means no one's there physically at all. We find that that's not actually always people's interpretation. The ABCC, being the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, does not offer any information, material, CMRs, or guidelines on this piece at all. It's up to the local licensing authority, which in our case is the Board of Selectmen, to determine how they wish to proceed in these pieces. So this was a suggestion, again, as Liz mentioned, by Town Council, and this has the numbers in as suggested by Town Council, but that may not be what necessarily the board wants to go with. But it's all yours.
So I'm just going to read through these. If you're something that you're concerned about, stop me. Like Heather said, chances are there'll be number 3, 4, and 5 that we want to discuss. So the first says, the owner and/or manager of record shall be entirely responsible for any violations or infractions of the law, these rules and regulations, and disorders or disturbances of any kind which take place on the licensed premises, whether or not they are present, including the actions of employees and/or entertainers. So that means, whoever's on the permit. The official opening and closing hours are those that are designated on the licensee's liquor license. Number 3, last call shall be no later than 12:30 a.m. Any alcoholic beverage served must be consumed no later than 12:45. So when I first read this, my first concern was you're asking somebody to suck down a drink in 15 minutes because they want their last one. That probably isn't the most beneficial thing. So I thought that you might want to change that to say any alcoholic beverage served must be consumed no later than 1 a.m. The problem with that is that then you need to change the time, like number 4, all tables and bars must be cleared of all glasses, bottles, and containers of alcoholic beverages no later than 12:50, and all customers must be off the premises by 1 a.m. So in my own experience, if you have last call at 12:30, then you have to be done and tables have to be cleared in a half an hour at 1 o'clock, and then people have to be gone 15 minutes later. That's just my own opinion.
I mean, can't we say any alcoholic beverage must be consumed no later than 1 o'clock? I mean, you can say last call is at 12:30, and you've got to have consumed the beverage and be off the premises by 1 o'clock. You don't need separate times for those.
I think they recommend separate times from John. We got recommendations from town council. It's also what other communities have done. I think the problem becomes if you say you have to consume something by a certain time, does that mean now there's still glasses on the table for another 15 minutes? Does that mean I need to take the last swig of something, hand my glass quickly to the bartender to throw underneath and run out the door at the same time within 10 minutes?
As a
2
server,
seconds?
we always had to have the glasses off the tables by a certain time, and people had to be out of the restaurant by a certain time, and they were specific.
So it was that
It
cut and
was,
dry?
it was.
Okay. So,
But it's just, my concern was, you know, if your last call's at 12:30, do you really want somebody to drink their drink that fast and be out in a half, you know, that quickly? I mean, that's up to the board to decide.
so why don't you make last call earlier, if that's a
You
concern?
can, or you can keep it 12:30, make sure everybody's out of the building by a certain time.
I think-
It says last call shall be no later than.
Right.
Right, so last call's at 12:30. All the drinks and beverages have to be consumed and stuff off the table by 1, is that what you're saying, Shannon? And then you have to be, so the problem is when the police go by and they look in the window and there's somebody sitting at the bar at 1 o'clock, is the expectation that there's no glasses and their drinks are done at 1 o'clock, or that everybody is out by 1 o'clock? Or is the expectation that everything's cleared, they've just finished, now they have to 1:15 to make sure the restaurant is empty?
Well, is it possible that the official closing hour is 2 o'clock in some of these licenses?
No,
No, I
the
don't think so.
town has voted on 1. If you guys wish to reconsider certain
Says
evenings
1.
to be 2 o'clock, then you would have to go back and you'd have to have a public hearing and you'd have to vote it as such.
So number 4 should be off the premises by 1 o'clock then. If that's the closing hour, they should be out of there by 1
Well,
o'clock.
it does say that, it says,
Right.
and all customers must be off the premises by 1 AM.
Right, so we shouldn't change that. If you want
Well,
to...
John, in the Cambridge one, they give you an example that that's not necessarily the case. They say everyone has to be off the premises by 1:30. The biggest thing here, and I think Liz hit on a couple times, is really expectations. We need to make sure that the expectations are clear for the alcohol licensee. We also need to make sure they're clear for the police. Because if the police officer does not have a clear understanding, like a sheet of paper that says, this is what should be happening when, then we run into the same situation we've had in the past, where I think it's a misunderstanding. The bar owners and managers and employees feel they're doing what they're supposed to be doing because they're interpreting last call at 1 o'clock or closing, meaning no one else comes in, as opposed to everyone's out of the building.
Yeah, to me, closing hours is everybody's gone, you know?
Liz, my opinion is, I like it as written.
Okay.
Yeah, I was fine with it too.
Ladies, any concerns?
No, I feel the same way.
Okay. And you went over these with the police?
I have not yet. I had a brief conversation with the police chief this morning, and we talked about that this was coming on the board's agenda this evening, that I would send it over to him for review before the public hearing if he had any comments and changes on the time. And I'm sure you're going to hear from the licensees in a couple weeks as well, if they have any objections. Maybe they say, you know, it's impossible to do this short period of time. Can we possibly amend the times, change it to make it something we can accomplish?
Okay.
Just like how you were saying, I just want to say this out loud. So last call's at 12:30. They have to suck it down by 12:45, and then the bartenders have to really hurry and clear off the bars in 5 minutes, and then shush everybody out if they're having a party by 1 o'clock.
So, yes. And so I guess, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Then
I'm just curious, I just want to
But
be,
then I
you know.
look and it's not, I mean, you don't drive by Opa Opa or Paisanos
I've never
at
seen
1
where there's
o'clock,
500 people,
where there's
but-
enough people in there. I mean, if you
Yeah.
were downtown in Westfield and, you know, college was in and we're talking about Whip City on a Friday night, it'd be a different conversation, but.
Right. Just saying, you know.
Okay, so there's no concerns. Do you want me to keep reading all of this, or have you all read it and you have any concerns?
I'm fine, I read it.
I've read it, I'm fine.
Yeah, looks good.
Oh, there was one part that I had, right, 11, did we take that out?
We talked about taking out 7 and 8.
Okay, so 7 was, if it's necessary for any reason to have workmen or their employees on the premises after the time allowed for owners and employees as set forth in Rule 6, you must first obtain the approval of the Board of Selectmen. Your request must contain the reason, the number of people, their names, and the hours they will be on premises. So I thought, you know, it's pretty hard to have or to close your restaurant by 1 o'clock, especially if you've had people in there until 10 or 5 of 1. And so then if you have to obtain approval from the Board of Selectmen just to keep people in your restaurant to clean it, seems a little tedious and unnecessary. So I didn't think that 7 was necessary.
But number 6 explains, except for, they may be on the premises at any time.
Right, so what do you need 7 for?
in case they're going to be doing something else, maybe like construction or renovations or something
Isn't
like
that
that.
covered? Yeah, it's in 6, making renovations, making emergency repairs. Like, I don't think they need to tell us.
I
that
think you're
they're-
getting too nitpicky with
Yeah, I
7.
don't think that they need to get approval from us to stay in the restaurant after hours. It's covered in 6.
I'm not seeing renovations. Am I missing that?
No owner or employee shall consume any alcohol beverages.
Third line from the bottom on 6. Making renovations.
Not be prohibited
Oh,
from
okay.
being on premise at any time for the purpose of cleaning, making renovations, making emergency repairs to, or providing security for such premises, or preparing food for the day's business.
That's fine, I missed renovations there.
Okay, so we can get rid of 7. And the other one was,
8. Number 8.
in the event of an emergency that requires other than the owner and the employees on the premises after hours, you must call the Southampton Police Department and explain the nature of the emergency and supply said officer with the number and names of all persons on the premises.
You want to
I mean, if there's an emergency, probably the police department already knows about it, right?
And do you really have time to give names and telephone numbers and addresses and social security numbers if there's an emergency?
I think again, I adopted this from Cambridge, and I did more as opposed to less, because I figure it's a better approach. But on this piece, I think if I were to guess at their intent, and I imagine the police department wouldn't be too opposed to this concept, but it's the idea that, all of a sudden the police officer drives by because it's 2 a.m. in the morning, and there's 4 cars there. Why? Or maybe it's 2:30 and there's 4 cars there and there's lights on. Why? And I think it's just giving them a heads up and having better communication between them. I think that's what they were going for. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with Liz on to delete it. I just think that was their intent.
Well, we can leave it and let people.
Well, I think if we, on the third line after emergency, if we just truncate it there and skip the officer with the names and number of all persons, if there's an emergency, I'm thinking if there's some kind of electrical issue and employee calls somebody up and they go to check it out, I think they should make a call just as a backup saying, here's what we're here for, So I would say we take and supply said officer out.
Okay. Are there any concerns or questions about this?
Your only other one, Liz, was under number 5 at the end of the line where it said, any patron or any guest or any employee. You wanted to strike any employee?
Licenses are not permitted to allow any patron or any guest or any employee to enter the premises after the official closing hour or prior to the official opening hour. Oh, right. So you can't say that an employee can't come into the building to open the restaurant before it opens because you need to get prepared for the day.
Yeah, true.
So that needs to come out, an employee. Patron or guest, yes, but an employee needs to be able to get in the building and be able to stay in the building before and after.
What number you want?
5.
5.
Do we get rid of 8?
I think we left, I think we modified 8.
To just let them know it's an emergency?
And 5, my issue was that it said licensees are not permitted to allow any patron or any guest or any employee to enter the premises after the official closing hour or prior to the official opening hour posted on the license. But you can't go open a restaurant exactly when it opens. You need to be in there before and after. Okay.
Are you omitting that?
Just, or any employee.
Just like that, John.
Are there any other questions or concerns?
No, I just would like to know if the board would wish to proceed to move forward with doing a public hearing on this on the 28th and sending copies of this to all the alcohol licensees in the police department so everyone has the opportunity to be present.
Yes. Does anyone have any concerns about having a hearing, a public hearing on August 28th?
On July 28th?
July 28th.
Unless you want to do August 11th, if you feel July 28th too.
Don't we have a lot on our agenda?
I won't be here.
August 11th would be a great day.
Okay. Will do.
Next. Next, we have the June 9th election results and implications. John, this is where you were at before.
Yep.
On July 9th, the town held a special election with numerous ballot questions. All of the questions failed. It would be advantageous for us to have some kind of discussion as to what the repercussions of the failed items are and also to discuss where we go from here. So if anybody has any comments, we can take them now. Maybe a good point for you, John.
Well, what I was going to say on this Safety Complex Committee, I saw a letter to the editor in the paper the other day from one of our residents saying that the board didn't explain the cost to the questions to do with the safety complex in the redesign, which obviously we did. We had an article in the paper, and we discussed it at our meeting as well as at the Safety Complex Committee. There was no cost to it. So there was still a misunderstanding out there of what we tried to do with those two questions. I think because voters said, no, we're not going to allow you to come back with a new plan, and we have to come back with a new plan. I don't think there's anything we can do except come up with a way to present this to the town where it's going to be acceptable before the fire department falls in or the police department falls in. I can't see spending $2-3 million to fix those buildings up. So how do we do it legitimately?
Can I use the podium?
Sure.
Because I want to be able to see everybody, and I can't.
Go for it.
This is more natural for me.
What, the center of attention?
As a little kid, it's been going like that ever since. As you know, I've been working on the public safety project for 4 to 5 years now. Do we need to move forward? Absolutely. There's no question about the fact that the fire station, the police station are totally inadequate. But what I got out of this vote was the fact that people are just simply not ready for it. For whatever reasons, they're not ready for it. What I would suggest is that the Board of Selectmen disband the Public Safety Building Committee. And the reason is to give it a breather and then reformulate it when we get into the fall, early winter. Maybe we can bring new people in, maybe we can have some fresh ideas on this and approach it that way. I think we should be sending a polite letter to everybody, asking everybody that was on the committee, or basically complimenting them, thanking them for their time and everything else, and then closing out that committee. But seriously, looking at reestablishing it come, we'll say fall, early winter. And then hopefully we'll have more volunteers, younger volunteers, and we can readdress this again, because the issue's not going to go away.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah, and it's going to cost more.
No.
The longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. But that said, I think everybody in town needs to take a step back from this and regroup and rethink it. That's my 2 cents.
Fair enough.
I agree with you.
I do. So if we're going to leave this alone, and what happens now for safety issues at these buildings? Are any of the police or firefighters in danger?
Well, I mean, I guess the buildings are not in the best shape.
But I mean, Charlie, in what you've seen, is there anything right now, pardon the pun here, on fire? Like, is somebody going to get hurt?
I can't tell you someone's going to get hurt. I can tell you the buildings are in deplorable situations. They have to be addressed, but I'm looking at a town that's voted not to fund anything, so there's no money to move forward with this. We've done great work. We've been able to take and secure the land, get the septic, get the deeds cleaned up around here. We're still going to move at cleaning up the trees and everything, but we're waiting for the ground to freeze again. So we're getting the site prepped. But to flat out sit here and say that it's unsafe for them to be in, I can't answer that. It's been like that for a long, long time, but it's very obvious that it's not adequate for what we need. It's a terrible situation, Jackie. It's terrible.
I guess I'll give you my 2 cents. And my 2 cents will be in regards to question 1 and having an elected versus appointed treasurer versus collector. And as we sit here tonight and listen to the status of departments and departments who act on their own and independently of the town, and people who work in town, or whatever the case may be, who make their own rules and don't follow the rules, and we don't have any money to do this, and we don't have any money to do that, and everybody's urging for this fiscal responsibility, yet at the same time, we're willing to say, no problem. Whoever happens to get voted in for the town treasurer is okay with me, regardless of what qualifications they have. To me, it's really, really disheartening. You want all of these qualified volunteers to come and be on the Concom and be on the Finance Committee and be here and be there, but you're willing to have somebody completely unqualified be in charge of your money. To me, that is the most fiscally irresponsible thing that there is, and I'm really disheartened by that vote. So I'm disheartened by the whole thing. I'm disheartened by the feedback that you get about, not having good advertising of the town meeting and not knowing when it is and not knowing how to vote and not knowing you can, I'm disheartened by all of that. But that's the trend in Southampton. To me, it's, when I ever got elected here and thought, anybody can have that job, just does not make any sense to me. And to see that, I lose a little bit of faith after that vote. So if there's no other questions or concerns about these results and the status of that, I mean, you could talk about it all night long, but we do have 4 more pages to go.
Well, the other concerns are the police department relative to the officers and that.
Charlie, I think that's going to be a security concern that we're going to want to address first in executive session.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. I
Okay.
appreciate that comment. But it is a concern, and people need to understand that it's raised to that level of going into executive session for discussion.
Yep.
The other part of it is the fuel depot. We're buying gas at a gas station now.
Doesn't make sense.
It's quite the business we're running.
Yep. Okay. So I will move on to the appointments. The following appointments are alternates in the event that Tom Quinlan, our building commissioner, is out of town or unavailable.
Excuse me, Liz, pardon me. George had his hand up. Could he please?
He's welcome to come to the podium if you'd like to speak.
As you probably all know, my stand on question number 1, or anybody running for office, over the years, and now you're taking my and everybody else's right to vote away. Right? What you're really saying is that the people out here, the voter, don't have the brains enough to vote for the correct people. Okay, that's what you're really saying.
I'm saying that people don't spend the time to find out the facts, as evidenced by the forum that we had, that the room barely filled. People don't care enough to make educated decisions. They just don't. Some of us do, George, I do, you do, but we're not 1,000 voters. We're 2. The majority of the people in this town do not take the time to make educated decisions.
1,100 people voted.
Out of 40-something hundred.
Well, yes, let's just take 1,100. Out of those 1,100, 600 voted, that's not taken on average, voted against this. Voted against all the spending. And what you're really missing is, why did they vote in that way? Because they don't have the money. People in this town don't have the money that some of you other people have. Some of these people are still working, others don't. Okay? Some are worth $500,000 are sitting in here, or $250,000. And some of the people in this town just live on Social Security and maybe their retirement, and maybe they got a little bit of savings. And you say to them, oh, this is only going to cost you $300 a year. That's taking $300 out of their mouth or out of whatever they're doing and how they're getting by.
I don't disagree with you, George, but what my point is that if you only have that much money, then why do you want somebody without any expertise managing that money? That doesn't make any sense.
Which didn't cost them anything
It didn't cost anything.
to vote for treasurer.
George, I agree.
Yeah, she ran in that office. There was 2 people running in that, and when she got in, I'm talking about Donna. Okay, and I shouldn't mention her name. Right? And she won the election. both those people were qualified. Do you think somebody in here with a high school education is going to try to get this job?
Yes.
George, can I just?
Let me finish.
Sure.
They can put their name in. By the time it gets on a ballot, most of the people in this town will know their education.
But they won't come and vote.
They probably won't come and vote, but the odds are, so only 25% of the people voted in this election.
Doesn't that make you
That doesn't mean the
sad?
other 75% were for her, or for him, or whatever.
But if you're not going to vote, then your vote doesn't count. If you're not, if
No,
you're
yeah,
not
wait a
going to
minute.
come out, then it doesn't matter what you thought.
If 1,000 or 1,100 people voted, and the majority of those people were for whatever got voted in or voted out, then that's what it is.
That's fine. I'm just saying it's disheartening to me.
Yeah, well, maybe disheartening, but it's a fact, and it goes on in this country all the time. It's still taking somebody's right to vote for that office.
Can I say something? I mean,
Wait a minute, let me just finish and you can have it, okay? What really got me started was, somebody in this room said to the assessor, all right, I'm gonna try to quote it correctly, I probably won't. You're gonna be this office is gonna be the next appointed office.
I think it's a great idea.
No, I didn't think it was a great idea, because after that, maybe the clerk, all right? This is all we have left in this town. We vote for these offices, maybe spending money, or whatever spending you want to do, and to select people. There isn't too much left when you start taking all these other offices away.
The finance committee, the personnel policy procedures board, the water commission, those are all voted.
Yeah, but
That's right.
But I
And
think-
that will be next. And before you know it, it's all appointed. Yeah, make a point.
George, I'm hoping that you'll join me at the next town meeting, and let's put up everybody. Let's put the police chief up, fire chief, accountant, highway superintendent. Why are we just doing the, what do you call it, the
Some people
treasurer?
like them to get all appointed.
So why don't we do that?
I think a popularity vote is not the way to go. I think in your example, maybe last
I
time.
was in the Army, so I can run the police force? Yeah, I know something about guns. My father was a fireman for 44 years. I could run the fire department. Hey, I could be a good old boy here and get elected. Is that what you want, George?
That's not what I want.
Well, what do you want?
Okay.
I think if we have 2 or 3 qualified candidates in any election, I agree with you 100%, let the voters go pick them. 3 elections ago for the treasurer, we had an unemployed painter and a clerk that had 6 months' experience. We got the better of the 2 candidates, but I got to tell you, there was a lot of trouble after that with the office and back taxes and all that. Because unless you have a qualified person, and Donna mentioned a name because she's a well-qualified person, that's great. But what happens when you have a choice of 2 unqualified people? You want it bad or do you want worse? And I think that's where if you had somebody that's appointed, for instance now, I don't think a lot of people that are qualified are running for, say, a particular office, we're talking about the treasurer. But I think if you posted a position and said, here's what we're paying, here's the benefit level, we'd get people from out of town that would come in very qualified. People in town can only run for the election. So we cut away a whole lot of great people out there. So I think that's the idea. And I use the example that if, we're a $15 million business and the treasurer quits in a corporation, you go out to the shop floor and say, got any volunteers that want to come in and manage the money? That's what we do. And sometimes we're lucky, like with our current one. Other times, we lost, I think, a lot of money a few times ago because the person wasn't aware of what to do. Not that the person didn't want to try, the person just didn't know what to do. I think that's the reason we need to have one. And it's not to take a vote away. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but wouldn't you rather have the most qualified person, whether you voted for the person or not? I mean, isn't that the idea?
As far as I'm concerned, I agree with you as far as a qualified person goes. We got to find another way of doing this, okay?
Yeah.
Because what happens then, it becomes a football. Even in this little town, we play games. The games that go on in this town, and I've been sitting here long enough, and most of you people on the board know what I'm talking about, the games that go on in this town, you couldn't dream up if you were writing a book. And it shouldn't be that way. We just lost the assessor. Why did we lose the assessor? Now, goodness, just leave it at that. How many years did she have working here, 10, 12, 13, 15 years? How many years is it gonna take for an assessor that we get from outside of town to learn this town? Where everything is, what's going on? She just walked away. Not just, she was just, I would almost say she was forced. So some of the things that went on, she went out the door. She went to the next town. I understand she's got a $12,000, $15,000 raise. How are we gonna replace her for the money we were paying her?
But that's normal in the corporate
That
world.
was not normal.
If somebody's
It's not
here,
normal to shove somebody out the door.
no,
Okay,
go
so
on.
I'm going to time this conversation out. The Board of,
My apologies. That's what they call it.
thank you. We're going to move on to the appointments. The following appointments are alternates in the event that Tom Quinlan, our building commissioner, is out of town or unavailable. It's beneficial to have numerous backups in the event one of them is called to assist. They're paid $40 per call. The three appointments to the alternate building commissioner are Paul Tacey, Paul Healy, and Carissa, I only have an L.
Lissee, L-I-S-E-E.
Lissee. So I would accept a motion to appoint the three alternate building commissioners.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next is the special municipal employee designation. This is an annual designation by the Board of Selectmen. Last year, the Board of Selectmen made this designation in August. All the current boards are on the list. I remember us going through this list more than once and making sure we had everybody on it. So has everybody had a chance to look at that list? I don't think there's anything been added since last year. Are there any questions?
So moved.
I would accept a motion to approve the fiscal year 16 special municipal employee designation list.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next is our purchasing order policy for fiscal 16, and you have a flow chart attached somewhere. I have yours, Jackie.
Do you have one for yourself?
No, but I saw it this afternoon.
Okay.
Purchasing order flow chart was discussed at the last department head meeting, and the amendments were made from the group. A formal policy is still underway with Donna, Vicky, and Heather. Heather?
So this is our basic piece of what we came up with at the last Board of Selectmen meeting. The board had asked that the purchase order amount be in the range of $500 to $2,500. After much discussion, especially with department heads and taking into their concerns, we thought $2,500 would be an appropriate amount. This chart takes into consideration some of the concerns the accountant had. We have not had an opportunity to formally discuss all of this because she has been out of town on vacation. But this is the general piece that the department heads have reviewed. Everyone seems to be online with. We've added some amendments as concerns have arose. The basic overview of this essentially is if it's $2,500 or more, you're required to pursue the direction of getting a purchase order. If the account is an expense for capital or for a community preservation committee, then you continue going down that line. If it is a budget line for only one purpose, for the example of being legal, debt, a maintenance line, or something that is HCOG approved, like when you get into Chapter 90 funds, then you move on to the next question. I'm sorry, if it is, then it checks out of the purchase order piece and they just process as normal. If it's not within those sections, they move on to the next question. Is the expense for electricity, gas, heat, or fuel? If it is, they process it as normal. If not, they continue and they actually go through the purchase order process. The hope is that at $2,500, we send the request out to the vendor prior to the purchase, and then at that point, the purchase order number is actually on the invoice, and it should save a lot of work on everyone's part, because the $2,500 should trigger in the accountant's office that a purchase order is needed. Upon that piece, the purchase order number is already on the actual invoice itself, and we move forward with there. We have not had the opportunity to discuss, Charlie, the concept of blanket purchase orders, but at this point, I think we're just trying to start at something that everyone feels isn't too burdensome on their piece, but yet gives us some ability to see what's happening in the long run and keep a better auditing file.
So you want to move this for concept?
If we could move this for initial approval as our working base as we move into this fiscal year, and then we can always do amendments as we go forward and meet with Vicki, Donna, and even come up with the formal policy. But I think going through this with each of the department heads and even the police chief today. I have not had the opportunity with the fire chief yet, I have not seen him. I don't think he'd have any objection to this, because he was pretty much doing one for everything last year.
Can I make a motion that we do it that way? Go there?
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
I've got a question. Do you know how many actual purchases will require a PO? It's like 6 step down out of 9.
It shouldn't be overly burdensome. So it would be like if Randall wants to buy a part for one of the trucks and it's $3,000. The water department needs a part for the well and it's $6,000.
I guess my question is, are we only doing POs for 10% of our purchases, and does it make sense to have a system in place, or are we capturing something?
I think it benefits us in numerous ways. Number one, at $2,500, sometimes there's occasions where people are going to make multiple purchases from the same vendor, especially the larger departments, and that's going to help us catch more Chapter 30B, especially if numerous departments are using the same vendor. We're going to find out if we're going to have an issue with the vendor at triggering the purchasing laws. The other issue is that at $2,500, anything above that's really going to affect our budget as we move forward, and if it's not encumbered, we're going to be stuck come June and July of the following year, so we're going to be able to capture that a lot more.
So you think it's going to be beneficial to have it?
I think it's going to, I think it's beneficial to have in the first place. A lot of the vendors, when you're working with them, they won't even allow you to purchase things without a purchase order. A great deal of them, and I think this gives more, oversight. It's a large purchase. There should be a piece of paper that follows it up. It doesn't take people more than 5 minutes to fill out the piece of paper. They put the vendor information, they have it already saved in Excel, they just change the account number.
And I'm assuming this will allow you to do a purchase order for something you wouldn't normally do if a vendor says they want it, right?
Yes, yes. So if someone, like, for instance, I have the purchase for the additional gooseneck microphones of, I think it's like $800. They require a purchase order.
Okay.
So I have to do one anyway.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is the use of town council and requests. So currently,
Liz,
yes?
can we move this to like August 11th, because we have such a shopping list tonight?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
So there's been a lot of requests from department heads, from committees, commissions, boards, people in general, to use town council and have access to town council. So the issue is, in the past, for example, if the Policies and Procedures Board needed, to access town council, they would ask Heather, who would then ask the chair, who would then say yes or no. Generally, those kind of things are easy to say, sure, no problem. There have come a few times lately where someone has asked for access to council, and I have said, I think we need a vote of the board. I don't think that I can make that decision for the town or for 5 people. So what we need to decide is who should have access to town council and who should grant it. Do you want every department, commission, department head to be able to say, yes, I want to use town council? Or would you prefer that the process stay the same and that there needs to be some sort of check and balance?
I have a question.
Sure.
Does each department, let's say they do have access to town council, would that come out of their budget to
No.
pay for that?
Comes out of our budget.
The only time it comes out of their own budget, planning board wants to use town council, you say, yes, knock yourself out. They have their own budget. Same thing for ZBA, same thing for Greenway, because they have their own legal budget for that purpose. Everyone else, so Personnel Policy Board, Finance Committee, Conservation, this board, all of it comes out of the general legal fund. Generally, we've been able to, with the exception of certain events that were unexpected, we keep the legal consult down to about $2,000 a month, which is actually pretty good, and only comes to what we generally budget annually. The benefit of having the same person work with town council all the time is you know exactly who to call, you can shorthand the conversation, and a lot of times it's the same stuff that comes up year after year, so you just simply refer to, okay, the case that's pending is this is where we're at, what do we need to do from here? And I'm pretty good actually at watching the clock and timing it to keep my segments shorter so that our bills stay shorter.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
So the reason that we can't put this off, Charlie, and can we vote on this tonight? So,
How you wish to proceed with town council, yeah.
well,
Are you talking
and the
about
grievance, and the grievances.
I would just say, I mean, in general, what happens is if we get a request in for town council, whatever it is, I generally call Liz. Most of the time, there's no debate about it, it's just, you know, planning board wants to use it, finance committee has this, building commissioner has this problem, yes, go ahead, go ahead. Problem that comes into play is when it's a potential conflict with the town's interest. So if you have multiple people in town, or departments or boards or department heads who wish access to town council, the problem becomes town council can't advise everybody when they have adverse interest. And at some point, you conflict out, which means if they talk to party A, and there's a matter later on that's raised and the town is in a lawsuit as a result of whatever the issue was, they cannot advise the town. So we can't even use our own town council at that point because they would conflict out. So, I mean, that's something I think we do pretty good at, bouncing back and forth, and even I've had a conversation with the town council to try to keep it short of, this is what's asked, you know, this is my concern, and what's your concern? We bounce back and forth and usually come up with the concern of conflicting out piece, and if so, that generally results in I don't think it's a good idea to allow access for Peter, Sally, Mary, Joe.
So, go ahead.
So the issue is when a request is given, the person requesting the service is met with silence from the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. If one was told why, it would probably alleviate a lot of the requests, because they'd understand why. Conversations I've had with Heather explained to me why, and that was the end of it. But the point is that certain individuals ask for this and don't get an answer. And that's a communication problem. It's not so much getting town council to talk to them as much as responding back why we can't do what we need to do. I understand totally where we're at with some of this stuff. It's just responding to these individuals so they understand. And I think that falls to Heather to basically get back to them with a response. So I think what the board needs is basically what was just discussed in a bullet that can be just emailed back to them, that based on these circumstances, this is the reason why you cannot.
So I'm okay with Heather drafting that email and sending it.
Does that sound?
It sounds reasonable to me. I just wanted people to, you know, be aware of why I didn't say yes or no to department heads, because I didn't feel like it was my place to do that.
Well,
Sure.
I think it should be based on, you know, the discretion of the whole board, and also the history of a past event. And if that person, if they were to utilize town council, would that keep the town out of liability?
Well, I think that.
Will it cost us more if we've already spent a lot on a situation?
So for the benefit of the town, if you allow that person to use town council, and then, what did you call it, Heather? They conflict out. Now what do we do as a town?
We would be trapped in a situation of having to hire a private attorney to defend us.
And that's not what the purpose of town council is. And I think you're right, it has to be a decision of the whole board, which is why we're having this conversation, because I didn't make the decision for the board.
Well, you know, circumstances like this, when the question comes up for litigation, need to go into executive session if we're going to get into the finites of it.
I think we just want to know who can use town council and who can't. And do we want to keep the process the same?
I think the process of the request goes to the chair, goes through Heather, the chair makes the initial decision. If the chair sees that this is, complex, then it goes to the board for a full vote.
Complex and costly.
Right.
Right.
Not a
Usually
simple question.
With a legal thing,
Right.
usually if it's complex, it's automatically costly.
Right. But even with simple questions, it could be costly.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think that's a bad idea, Charlie. I just think it's important for the board to remember that it's not something that I can pop out a question and each person can respond to the group, because that's considered deliberation.
Right.
So the only way to resolve it is how we did last time, where I can pop a question, and I can take a polling, and I can move forward with the majority. But unfortunately, I still can't, other than saying, this is the direction we're going, I can't even communicate, the vote's 4-1, because it can't be a vote. It can't be deliberation. It can be advice, but it can't be deliberation.
But if you reach that level, then we have to have a meeting. If we reach that level.
Because we don't want to complicate the simple things.
Right.
I agree.
So are we moving nowhere? We're just keeping the process the same? We're not changing anything?
I don't see any policy in that, so it's just a process that's just been established, and that's it. It's
I
not
think there was a
actually,
vote at some point that you could probably pull the minutes up a
because
couple
I'm
of
looking
years
at our
ago.
policy stuff, and we gotta talk privately about some of the stuff that's in that.
Okay, so we can move on then. We have PCFs. Could you pass those down? Our PQB's been waiting patiently. The first PCF is a resignation separation PCF for Lori Stewart, the principal assessor. Lori's last day is this week. She'll be leaving us to take a job in Easthampton. I would accept a motion to sign the PCF for Lori Stewart. Sorry, just a separation form. You haven't. What's this personal separation form is different than a PCF that says she doesn't work anymore. So we don't have a PCF, just a paper that says she's leaving. So we could accept her resignation.
Yes.
I would accept a motion to accept her resignation.
But I believe a PCF would still need to be filed as
Yes.
ours.
Do we send this back and not accept it until we get the PCF? Is that the best way to do it?
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, because we're talking about not following the rules here. I mean, let's start now. If it requires PCF, let the Board of Assessors do a PCF and attach this to it.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Do you want to make that a motion?
Yes, I'll make that a motion.
Is there a second to not sign and return requesting a PCF?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any nays?
Good catch.
Abstentions? Jackie?
I'm just gonna,
Gotta do something.
I know, but it's just, she resigned, I mean, it's just,
It's
why
not,
do we
it's
make
not
this?
affecting her, it's the process that we
Okay,
have to
all right
follow.
then.
So that, yes? No?
I mean, it should,
Would Art mind getting to the podium?
the PCF's a pretty important document, and seems to be totally lost on this community. How do you tell the treasurer to stop payment, salary or benefits, or without an approved, how do you start somebody? We have this all the time. Somebody will come in here, I won't say from what department, will start their job without an approved PCF, and they get hurt on the job. What happens then? Who's liable? I don't know. The town didn't hire the person because it's not been, the PCF hasn't been signed off, but they were working and they got hurt. So we need to be really careful with this, and I've told Donna, do not start anybody until you guys, because you're the final ones, sign off the PCF. Simple stuff, but we're going to get nailed one of these days because we're allowing this stuff to happen.
Yeah, unless we push back on the department head, they'll keep doing it.
Absolutely.
And I think that we start with this one.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next is, see if I can keep this in order. PCFs for the fire department for Jessica Kowal. Hold on, let me make these in order. This is for Jessica Kowal at the fire department, EMTB, third rider. Third riders are students learning to work on the ambulance. This was signed by the accountant and the PQB, which means that everything is filled out correctly and there's money in the account. So I would accept a motion to sign the PCF for Jessica Kowal. Anybody would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just gonna make a pile. The next is for Jeanette Peretti for the fire department, which is also an EMTB third rider. I'm gonna tell you all of the third riders, that might be the best thing to do. Sean Mitchell for the fire department, an EMTB third rider. Adam Scott Cutter, an EMTB third rider. Those are the only three. So I would accept a motion to sign the PCFs for the 3 EMTB third riders.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Gentlemen? Aye.
Aye.
Next, you have a PCF for Moira O'Neill for the fire department and EMTB, which also been signed off by the accountant and the PQB. I would accept a motion to sign.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is a PCF for John Ferrero, a paramedic firefighter, which has also been approved by accountant and the PQB. Is there a second?
Liz, can I just mention for the semantics, it's verified by the accountant, not approved by the accountant?
Just verified that there's money in the account. Yes, thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
There's a PCF for Sharon Hart to the fire department. It's on the agenda. It was
It's
amended
on
this
the
afternoon.
newest version of
It
the
was
agenda.
amended this afternoon. Sharon Hart as a firefighter. This was, the PQB moved not to approve the personnel change form for Sharon Hart inasmuch as it appears to be a violation of the state anti-nepotism law, Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 23. So this is the fire chief's wife. There is a non-disclosure, or there is a disclosure agreement signed, which is attached from the chief. There's also some information attached from the Ethics Commission stating that this is a violation of the ethics law to hire an immediate family member. So the PQB did not approve it.
What disclosure was signed then?
You can just, the same one that Randall signs when, you know, if Amanda, who is a real estate attorney, is working on a project that he has to work on, you know, the roads, there's a disclosure, that kind of thing. So, it's on the agenda because it was submitted, it wasn't signed, and it needs to follow the process which now comes to us. So I would accept a motion to sign or not sign, but it seems to me that there's a conflict of interest. Mr. Lawrence.
Excuse me, just one point of order. I believe the chief did not sign it. I was under the impression somebody on the board was going to sign it for him.
There is no department head signature on here, you are right. So I guess we don't really need to do anything, right?
It was not on there.
Sharon Hart is sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to her.
She's been waiting a while.
Well, if she wants to speak, she's more than welcome to. I don't have any questions. If the board has questions.
I mean, I think, in my experience, it violates 268A. But the other side of it, to be honest with you, I think it would make it more difficult for the chief, seeing all the concerns and issues we have. I don't think we need to throw anything more at him to, you know, make it tougher for him. That's the other side of the question I look at.
So my question is, the Ethics Committee, are you talking about the state said it wasn't a good idea?
State Ethics Commission.
The State Ethics Commission.
Commission, pardon me. So then why did Kalita and other firefighters, fire chiefs have family members that work in the fire department, and this is not being accepted?
Well, I don't know that Mr. Kalita actually hired
Well,
any of them.
didn't he have his son working there? I mean, didn't other family members? Charlie, you know the history of this. Can you
They all did.
elaborate?
You can go back to the Labrie family, you can go to the Barkham family, you can go to the Kalita family, and this is not an unknown in the fire service. There's plenty of departments with that. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the track record is there.
It's also not a very good one. Mr. Palermo?
I think this is an example of people saying, we always did it that way. The ethics rule says that you may not hire an immediate family member. But in addition to that, they may not work under the direct supervision. The family member may not work under the direct supervision, may not be appraised by the the other family member, nor may the employer delegate to a subordinate the responsibility to appraise that person, because the appraiser is still answerable to the boss. So my understanding of the ethics law is that it is not lawful to have an immediate family member performing directly for another family member. It would be different if, for example, a member of the select committee, select board, there was somebody working in another department over which you did not have direct control. If there's disclosure and so forth, in my opinion, that would be permissible. But in the same department, under the supervision of, in this case, the firefighter's husband, I believe that's not keeping with the ethics rule.
But my husband's a plumbing inspector, and I'm on the select board, so
Do you
this
appraise
is
him?
allowed.
Do you appraise him?
Well, I mean, if he did something wrong, I would be involved because I'm on the select board.
You would probably have to remove.
So why couldn't the fire chief recluse himself? I mean, why couldn't he say, you know, not sign something and not be involved?
Because
in
you
any
may not
purpose?
delegate to a subordinate to do the evaluation for a family member.
Yeah, this is a day-to-day working relationship.
Yeah. I mean, the chief could determine the work schedule. If there were a pay raise involved, the chief would have some control over that, even if just approving the budget.
Should we have the chief come in and talk to this? I mean, should we ask him?
You know, I'm not
exactly
telling.
how he would, you know, supervise or not supervise her?
It's
Is
not
she
my
gonna be-
place to tell the select board.
But you know
how-
what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
can we give him
But-
at least the opportunity to come in and talk on this?
But Jackie, it
Uh,
was on- it was
it's
on
not-
the agenda, it was on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not my place to tell the select board what to do, but I would urge you maybe just to read the bulletin that came with that from the Ethics Committee. It's not something we're making up. And if you read down, and if you read down all the way through, the chief certainly complied with the disclosure statement. And he was very upfront. I'm not suggesting there's anything untoward about it, but once we're presented with the document, we have to ask, can we do it? And it tends to violate the ethics rules. Okay.
So an interesting thing on the state ethics website, if you go on, you can actually read decisions where they've decided on similar things. I understand the concept that, you know, maybe we've done this in the past, maybe other departments all do this, but it's not so much, has anyone done this, but more so, has anyone been fined for doing the exact same thing? Because you could do something forever wrong, and if no one reports it, it's not a problem. That's not generally how things operate in this town. As we know, you know, we are one of the most popular towns in the Ethics Commission. So they know who we are. And the thing is if you read through the decisions, I only made it through the letter H in searching for keywords, and there were 3 instances where there was actually a fire chief who hired a family member, going out so far as a brother-in-law, a niece, and a wife. And in the wife one, it was interesting because he had his deputy and someone else in the fire department on the selection committee. They had all the applications that came in. They reviewed them. They said, you should hire this person, who happened to be the fire chief's wife. The person was paid a salary, whatever it was. He went forward and he said, okay, well, going back to Jim's point, the subordinate piece, and said, okay, we'll move forward with this. And I think he was fined in the sum of around $4,000 for a violation of the nepotism law.
I mean, just as select board members, and I do it because of my job, but if you go to the State Inspector General's office website, sign up for their newsletter, their monthly newsletter, and all of this flows down to you, and you see all these cases, and it's amazing, excuse me, how stupid people are. It's just amazing. But this would be a way to educate yourself and see what's going on. It's just amazing.
So, I have a quick question. Did the chief call the Ethics Commission to see what they said about this, and did they send him a letter stating what to do on it? Because I know when I called for me, they had said what disclosures to file to be able to work in the assessor's office and serve on the board. And I'm just wondering if he did the same thing and called to see if there was some sort of disclosure that he would have to fill out that would make it to where it would be legal.
I don't know if he called the Ethics Commission or not.
But there is a process to submit in writing to get an exemption, and they will tell you yes or no if you can get it.
Liz,
Yes,
may I make a motion?
sure.
I move that we table this discussion until such time as the fire chief gets an approval from the personnel board.
Well, they did get this, and they didn't approve
They
it.
denied it.
They denied it.
Right. Until we get an approval from them, this is tabled.
I think what Charlie's saying is if the fire chief chooses to write to the Ethics Commission to get a letter saying that he is exempt and then presents it back to the Personnel Policy Procedures Board, and they say, based on this new information, that an exemption applies to you, we would like to reconsider our previous decision, and then in that case, pass this forward and approve it, and then it would come back to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
If I may, I speak on behalf of the board.
Yep.
I think that we were saying we're not comfortable approving it because we believe it violates the Ethics Commission, but moved it to the Select Board because you're the ultimate deciders. And you have every right to overrule us. And if you don't agree with our interpretation, all we do is make recommendations when we sign off. So there's no way that I'm aware of that the Personnel Policy and Procedure Board would approve the PCF because we don't believe it's lawful to do so. But that's just our opinion, and this might be a situation, where if there's strong disagreement among the board, you would refer it to your town council.
I'm making the motion because I agree with you.
Oh,
Then you would make a motion not to sign, not to table.
yeah.
Will you pull that back and we'll make another one that kind of simplifies it, clarifies it?
I gotta make it real simple, huh?
Yes.
We don't,
All
I
right.
will. Go ahead. But you gotta pull this one back.
All right, I withdraw my motion.
You want me to, okay. Okay, I'll make a motion, we don't approve this appointment at this time and leave it open, so if the chief wants to go back and do some more background checking and get an okay from the State Ethics Committee, he can run it through the system again, and we'll consider it at that time.
I'll second it, but it sounds like what I just said.
No, you were pushing it back to them, I think.
You just did.
No,
Well,
I
no,
pushed
he's
it back
talking
to the
about the
chief.
state, he's talking about the state commission, ethics committee. That's what I was asking for, because that's the law that I read.
Yeah, 268,
Right,
yeah.
and that's not, it didn't go to the state yet, so that's what I was asking for.
Right, that's what I was asking for, a letter
Right,
from the
right.
Ethics Commission.
So,
So there's a motion, is there a second?
second.
Charlie did.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of not signing?
Aye.
Aye. The next is a PRP, hold on,
Sorry to keep you waiting.
there's
Ms.
so
Owen.
many. I'm on the PCF for Geraldine Swanson for the health director for up to 90 days, but that's not really what it is, right?
It's not on there, Jim.
Well, I got the-
I'm looking at an old one, sorry. I'm looking at my old agenda. Okay, so we have a PCF for Shannon Cutler, a promotion to acting principal assessor.
Then it flips.
This says Lori's leaving the principal assessor position. Shannon's going to take over and train for this job. We will reassess after 90 days. That's per the Board of Assessors. The PQB did not sign off. It says not approved by the PPPB because the position, in our opinion, must be posted, and because of the ambiguity of the reasons set forth in the PCF, i.e. Shannon is going to take over and train for the job, we will reassess after 90 days. So the Personnel Policies and Procedures Board was not happy with and did not agree with the wording on the PCF, so they did not sign off. I wasn't at that meeting, so if I'm missing something that I didn't write on the back, please let me know. Also, Per Mass General Law, if you take a job at an appointed position, you are not eligible for promotion within that department during that time, or 6 months after you have left the elected board that you serve on, i.e. the Board of Selectmen. So it makes her uneligible to fill that position.
I talked to them today, the Ethics Commission. They said because it was in the same office and it was temporary, and I was continuing to do my job but doing additional duties to the other job, that it was fine and nothing else needed to be filled out.
You didn't have to fill out a disclosure or an ethics?
The one that I already have
Which
covers
covers
that. Yep.
Okay.
But it sounds like temporary versus we're going to reevaluate after 90 days to see if you stay in the position. I guess that's where I have a little difference there. Am I hearing that right? And the other question, I was just going to address it in general, are there qualifications for the principal assessor that you have to meet? And so, again, I don't know if our candidate meets them, trying to be, meets them or not. So, yeah, I have some questions on that.
I mean, in general, what we're talking here is that we don't have acting positions in town. We have temporary positions, but that doesn't apply because we already have a person that has a job, so she couldn't take a temporary job. And yeah, there's definitely a job description that's on file for principal assessor.
So the alternative is to post a position and have
Just follow the rules.
whoever apply.
Again, we don't have any skin in the game, we just say follow the rules. If it's a new, it needs a replacement, it should be posted, and just like any other job in the town.
Okay.
So am I right to say that if it didn't say we will reassess after 90 days, it would lead you to believe that the PRF was being followed and the process was being followed, but this says reassess this after 90 days? It doesn't lead you to believe that you're going to actually post the job and take
Right.
applications?
I mean, anybody's eligible to if the job's posted. We're trying to get, again, transparency here.
Right.
I mean, we don't want, again, lawsuits, somebody coming back and say, hey, I wanted that job, and I didn't get an opportunity to get the job. So, just what do you call it? Make sure it's posted and you follow the bylaw.
This may not be their intention either, but the way the PCF was submitted to us almost suggests pre-selection. It says that Shannon will take over the job and will train to do the job and will get a raise, and after 90 days, see how well she's doing. And I'm not saying that's the case, but based on the way the PCF is worded, it suggests that if she's successful in the first 90 days, she'd become the principal assessor. And we're saying that when Lori left, the job became vacant, and under ordinary procedures, the job should be posted and should be open to qualified candidates. And I don't know if Shannon's qualified or not, but the job description certainly calls for certain certifications and skill sets, which she may or may not have. But that was my reasoning.
Yeah, I think if we post it, it'll protect the town, but it also could protect Shannon too. Because once you get embroiled in something down the road, it takes the person in the position and gets him in the middle of it. So I think we should do it the proper way.
So my question then is, how do you fill the position and do Lori's job without letting somebody take over in the interim while it's being posted? What is the alternative?
I think you can do that. You can post a position, and you could have somebody take it over on a temporary basis, those duties, and maybe underhire a temporary person to help out. I mean, I don't see there's an issue with saying to Shannon, for the next 30 or 60 days, we're going to have you do more duties, but once the person's hired, you'll have your current position, or if you happen to be promoted, and, that's done all the time.
So I think that's what my board was going for. So are you saying that it's just worded incorrectly? Because maybe if you're specific on how you want the board to word it, they would reword it.
I think what we're saying that the position should be posted.
Correct, but you were also saying about a temporary position.